What if the secret to success in today's fast-moving world isn't about talent, but about how fast you can learn? Imagine being able to master complex skills, not in years, but in months. Imagine reinventing yourself at will, turning obstacles into breakthroughs, and outpacing even the smartest people in the room, simply because you know how to learn better than anyone else. This isn't a fantasy, it's a strategy. It's not for the lazy, it's for the relentless. It's not for those who wait, it's for those who build. Ultra learning is a blueprint for mastering anything, no matter who you are or where you start. Whether you want to speak a new language, break into a new career, or sharpen your mind like a weapon, this book will show you how to take charge of your growth, destroy distractions, and learn at the speed of ambition. The rules have changed. Degrees aren't enough. Talent isn't enough. The winners of tomorrow are those who can teach themselves anything, fast, deeply, and fearlessly. And if you're tired of waiting for permission, if you're ready to unlock the power inside your own mind, then don't just read this book. Use it, live it, become unstoppable. Welcome to MindSpark, where great books meet powerful ideas. Chapter 1. Can a normal person learn like a genius? What if I told you that genius isn't born? It's built. That you, right now, already carry the raw material for brilliance. Not in your DNA, but in your choices. There's a moment, quiet, almost unnoticeable, when you realize something needs to change. Maybe it's the feeling that your potential is being wasted. Maybe it's that creeping whisper in the back of your mind saying, you were meant for more. And maybe, just maybe, you're finally ready to listen. That moment was exactly where Scott Young found himself. Frustrated, uninspired, watching life drift past like a movie he wasn't even starring in. Until one question shook everything. What if I stopped waiting to be taught and started teaching myself everything I ever wanted to know? That question led him into an experiment. Not just any experiment, a transformation. He would try to do the impossible, learn the entire 4-year MIT computer science curriculum in 1 year. No classrooms, no professors, just him, his laptop, and an obsession. What happened next changed not only his life, but the way we understand learning itself. The lie we've been sold. We've been told a lie, a dangerous one. It sounds innocent, even flattering at first. Only special people can learn like that. You have to be gifted. Genius is rare, and you're either born with it or not. It's a comforting belief. Because if it's true, then we're off the hook. We don't have to push. We don't have to stretch. We don't have to be uncomfortable. But here's the truth. No one told you in school. You are capable of learning anything. If you're willing to take control, not passively, not someday, not when you feel ready, but now. Ultra learning isn't just a method. It's a mindset. It's a declaration of war against mediocrity. It's what happens when ordinary people stop waiting to be taught and decide to become extraordinary through the sheer force of focused, intense self-education. This book isn't about tricks. It's not a gimmick. It's not learn Spanish in 24 hours or trick your brain into remembering everything. It's about work. Deep, focused, strategic work. And if that scares you, good. That means you're awake. From MIT to polyglots. Real proof that it works. Scott Young didn't just finish the MIT challenge, he aced it. He passed the same exams, completed the same projects, and demonstrated the same knowledge as actual MIT graduates. But that wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. He went on to learn 4 languages in a single year. He tackled subjects most people spend a lifetime avoiding. He dove headfirst into learning business, art, public speaking, not because someone told him to, but because he could. And he wasn't alone. You'll meet others in this book. The artist who rebuilt her creative identity from scratch. The programmer who taught himself artificial intelligence in 6 months. The dropout who became a world-class chess master through radical self-study. None of them were geniuses in the beginning. What they shared was a mindset. If something is learnable, I will learn it. No permission required. That's ultra learning, and it's available to you. But what exactly is ultra learning? Let's be clear. Ultra learning is not casual reading. It's not watching a few YouTube tutorials and calling it a day. It's not about learning for fun, though it can be deeply satisfying. It's not even about cramming for a test or memorizing trivia. Ultra learning is a self-directed, aggressive, strategic approach to learning that prioritizes mastery, speed, and depth. It's for the person who's tired of scratching the surface, for the person who wants to break into a new career, reinvent themselves, or build a skill set no one can ignore. It's for the person who refuses to be left behind in a world that's changing faster than any school system can keep up with. If traditional education is a cruise ship, smooth, slow, predictable, then ultra learning is a speedboat, loud, fast, and cutting through the waves like it's on fire. It's bold, it's demanding, it's liberating. And yes, it works. What makes ultra learners different? They don't wait. They don't ask permission. They don't expect comfort or convenience. They don't settle for surface-level knowledge. Ultra learners design their own learning projects, build their own curriculums, set fierce, unrelenting schedules, break down hard problems and punch through them, fail, adapt, and keep going, faster than most people even start. They are not superhuman. They're just relentless. That's the shift you must make, from passive to proactive, from curious to committed, from someday to right now. For most of us, the idea of learning is deeply rooted in one place: school, rows of desks, whiteboards and lectures, grading curves and multiple choice tests. We were taught that learning is something done to us, not by us. And that's the trap. Because school, for all its good intentions, often kills the very spirit that fuels true learning: curiosity, initiative, experimentation, and purpose. Think about it. Were you ever taught how to learn? Did anyone show you how to design a skill-building roadmap? Were you encouraged to go faster than the pace of the class? Did they reward you for pushing outside the box? Probably not. In most cases, school taught you to stay in line, to meet expectations, to become good enough. But good enough is the enemy of greatness. And ultra learning is about burning that mindset to the ground. The crisis of modern education. We live in a world where information is everywhere, but transformation is rare. The education system was built for a different age, an era of factories, routine jobs, and fixed roles. It wasn't designed for a future where change is constant, creativity is currency, and adaptability is everything. In today's world, the winners aren't the ones with the fanciest degrees. They're the ones who can learn faster, solve real problems, reinvent themselves again and again. You don't need a gatekeeper. You don't need to go back to school and rack up debt. You need a system, one that gives you power over your own growth. That's what ultra learning offers. The moment of decision. There comes a moment for everyone when you're faced with a choice. Do I stay on the safe, predictable path, or do I take control of my learning and build a life on my terms? For Scott, that moment came when he asked himself, why wait 4 years and $100,000 for a computer science education if I can design my own and do it in one? Was it easy? No. Was it risky? Yes. But was it worth it? Absolutely. He didn't just learn computer science, he learned how to learn anything. And once you unlock that door, the possibilities are endless. Ultra learning is a path, not a shortcut. Make no mistake, this isn't a shortcut. This isn't some overnight hack. This is not 10 tricks to become a genius. Ultra learning is the long path, walked with intensity. But it's worth every step. Because unlike traditional education, where you're often boxed into a system, ultra learning hands you the map and says, go, create, build, struggle, fail fast, win big. This journey is yours now. You control the pace. You control the subject. You choose the tools. You shape the outcomes. It's not always glamorous. Sometimes it's hard, even brutal. But that's the cost of transformation. And let's be honest, if it was easy, everyone would be extraordinary. But they're not, because most people settle. Most people stop when it gets hard. Not you. Why this book matters. Now. We're living through an explosion of change. New industries appear overnight. Skills go obsolete faster than ever. Remote work, AI, automation. The landscape is shifting daily. In this world, those who cling to old models of learning get left behind. But those who embrace self-direction, rapid learning, and deep work, they thrive. They lead. They shape the future. This book is your field manual, not theory. Application, not fluff. Results. You're going to learn how to plan a self-learning project that actually works, how to stay focused even when motivation fades, how to break through plateaus and frustration, how to learn deeply, not just quickly, and how to turn knowledge into power, real, applied, life-changing power. You were not born to sit on the sidelines, watching others grow. You were meant to build your mind, to shape your skills like a sculptor shapes stone, to take control of your destiny through the most powerful tool you have, your ability to learn anything. This is your wake-up call. The rules have changed, and now it's your move. Let's be honest with ourselves. Everyone says they want to grow, to learn, to level up. But the truth? Most people won't. Not because they can't, but because they never truly decide. They wait for the right time, for the fear to go away, for someone to come along and hand them a roadmap. But the clock is ticking, and the price of inaction is higher than most people realize. Every day you delay taking control of your learning, you fall further behind in a world that rewards speed and adaptability. Stay stuck in jobs you've outgrown. Miss opportunities that require just a bit more skill or confidence. Watch others leap ahead, not because they're smarter, but because they're bolder. That's the hidden cost. The life you could have had, if only you had taken the leap. Rewiring the way you think about learning. Here's a truth that should shake you. Learning is not something you outgrow. It's something you upgrade constantly. Just like your phone, your car, your tools, your brain is software, and most people are still running on outdated programs from childhood classrooms. Ultra learning forces an upgrade. It tells your brain, we're not doing this the old way anymore. We're not just memorizing. We're not chasing grades. We're going deep. We're building real-world mastery. We're rewiring how you absorb, apply, and adapt information. You're not a passive student anymore. You are the architect, the builder, the hacker of your own intelligence. Learning is a skill, and skills can be mastered. This is perhaps the most powerful idea in this entire book. Learning itself is a skill, not just the subject you're learning, but the very act of learning. That means it can be studied, practiced, refined, mastered. And once you get good at learning, everything else becomes easier. Want to switch careers? Learn faster. Want to start a business? Learn smarter. Want to stand out in your field? Learn deeper. Ultra learning makes you unstoppable, because no challenge is out of reach when you can learn anything, quickly and deeply. This is why some people seem to pivot with ease. They've mastered the meta skill, learning how to learn. And now it's your turn. The power of self-directed learning. Let's define it clearly. Ultra-learning, EOL, self-directed, plus aggressive, plus strategic learning. Self-directed. You don't wait for permission. You choose what to learn, how to learn it, and when to learn it. Aggressive. You don't just dabble. You immerse. You push. You commit time, energy, and focus beyond the average. Strategic. You're not just working hard. You're working smart. You design your plan. You track progress. You adjust based on what actually works. This is not just about studying more. It's about studying better, with intention, with fire. You don't need a syllabus. You need a mission. Your first ultra-learning blueprint. Let's say you're ready. You've had enough of passive scrolling, of waiting, of excuses. You want to learn something, deeply, quickly, and for real. What do? Here's the basic ultra-learning process. You'll go deeper into each in later chapters. Define your goal. What do you want to be able to do? Speak a language? Build an app? Launch a product? Do meta research? How have others learned this skill? What resources exist? What challenges might you face? Create your curriculum. Pick the best tools, books, courses, mentors, real-world challenges. Schedule intense time. Block out focused, undistracted hours. This isn't about comfort. It's about commitment. Embrace struggle. You will hit walls. That's the sign you're learning. Push through. Measure progress. Track what works. Adjust what doesn't. Stay agile. Finish strong. Close loops. Complete projects. Celebrate breakthroughs. You'll explore each of these principles deeply in this book. Because ultra-learning isn't just a philosophy. It's a system, a strategy, a way of life. And it starts the moment you stop waiting. Let's stop pretending. You're not here because you're curious. You're here because something inside you is done waiting. You're tired of letting your potential collect dust, feeling stuck in mediocrity, watching others grow, build, and win while you wonder what's missing. Well, here it is. This is what's been missing. A system, a mindset, a method to take your learning into your own hands and never let go. Ultra-learning is not for the lazy. It's not for the easily distracted. It's for the obsessed, the hungry, the driven. And if you're still reading this, deep down, that's you. Now the challenge is simple. Will you keep scrolling, or will you take control? Start by asking better questions. Every transformation begins with better questions. Not, what should I do with my life? But, what do I want to learn that truly excites me? What would I be capable of if I could learn anything? What's holding me back? Fear, laziness, or just not knowing how to start? What would my life look like in 1 year if I committed to mastering a new skill? These aren't questions for a journal. They're questions for your next chapter. Ultra-learning gives you the tools, but you must bring the will. No more excuses. The world has changed. The gatekeepers are gone. You no longer need degrees, certifications, or permission to learn. Everything is out there. Online, free, open source, waiting for you to take it. So what's stopping you? Time? You waste more than you admit. Money? Most learning resources cost less than your last coffee binge. Confidence? That grows with every small win. The truth? The only thing between you and the next level is the courage to begin. Your ultra-learning journey begins now. This book isn't just a guide. It's a call to arms. Each chapter will give you one principle of ultra-learning. Real strategies, battle-tested by people who've taught themselves skills that changed their lives. You'll learn how to design your learning project with clarity, how to research smarter than 99% of learners, how to practice in a way that drives deep, lasting skill, how to drill for your weaknesses and turn them into strengths, how to retain what you learn and transfer it to real situations, how to stay motivated through challenges and setbacks, and most importantly, how to finish strong. One last thought before we move on. You already know what average looks like. You've lived it. But what if, for once, you bet on yourself? What if you stopped waiting for the world to give you permission and decided to give it to yourself? Your future doesn't need a permission slip. It needs a mission. Ultra learning is that mission. And now, it's yours. Chapter 2. First, draw a map. Begin with the end in mind. Before you go to war, you study the terrain. Before you build a house, you lay the blueprint. And before you embark on any bold learning mission, you map the mind. This is meta-learning. It's the art of learning how to learn what you need to learn. It's the strategic first move that separates the amateurs from the unstoppable. Because while most people dive straight into learning, blindly and impatiently, the ultra-learner pauses, studies, and scopes. They know, if I understand the game before I play it, I can master it before others even get started. What is meta-learning? Really? Meta-learning is a plan. It's a blueprint. It's a map of the subject you want to master, showing you the most efficient paths to mastery, the quickest ways around obstacles, and the shortcuts to brilliance. It answers, what exactly do I need to learn? Why am I learning this? How can I learn it in the most effective way possible? You're not just studying a topic, you're strategizing your attack. This is how elite learners make 6 months of learning feel like 6 years of experience. It's not magic, it's clarity with purpose. Step 1. Know your why. Everything begins with motivation. Not the fleeting kind that burns out in a week, but the kind that's rooted in purpose. Ask yourself, why this subject? Why now? What will mastering this unlock for me? Be honest. Don't pretend you're learning a programming language just because it's useful. Are you doing it to switch careers? To build your own app? To escape a job you hate? Your reason is your fuel. And when the journey gets hard, and it will, your why will be the fire that carries you forward. He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. Nietzsche. Ultra-learning doesn't begin with a textbook. It begins with a reason. Step 2. Define the learning scope. Now that you have your why, it's time to define the what. What exactly do you need to learn? Let's say you want to master public speaking. Don't just write public speaking and dive into YouTube videos. Break it down like a tactician. Vocal tone and projection, body language, speech structure, audience engagement, storytelling, handling Q&A, managing anxiety. Suddenly, public speaking is no longer a vague mountain. It's a series of clear, climbable hills. This is what ultra-learners do. They deconstruct complexity into manageable pieces. Because clarity kills overwhelm. Now you're not learning everything, you're learning what matters. Step 3. Benchmark others. Why reinvent the wheel? Whatever you want to learn, someone else has mastered it. Study them. Dissect their journey, not to copy blindly, but to extract wisdom. Search. Online course outlines, college syllabi, interviews with experts, masterclasses, Reddit threads, GitHub projects, skill trees from games. Yes, even those. You're building your mental GPS. Ultra-learners are scavengers of insight. They take what works, discard what doesn't, and forge their own method. When Scott Young learned MIT-level computer science in under a year, he didn't start from scratch. He copied MIT's curriculum, then customized it. That's ultra-learning. Copy strategically, then create uniquely. Step 4. Decide how deep to go. Not all knowledge needs to go to the core. Some skills require fluency, others demand mastery. Ask, Do I need to know this deeply or just functionally? Is this a core skill or a supporting one? How long am I willing to focus on this? Let's say you're learning Spanish. If your goal is to travel, maybe 1,000 words and basic conversation skills are enough. But if you want to negotiate contracts in Madrid, you'll need fluency, nuance, and culture. Define the depth before you dig. That's the meta learner's way. Step 5. Choose the tools and environment. Your strategy is only as good as your toolkit. Ultra learners don't just consume, they optimize. Choose active tools, flashcards, quizzes, mock projects, passive inputs, podcasts, lectures, background exposure, interactive formats, teaching others, debates, discussion. Solo versus social. Study alone or collaborate with others. Environment. Silent room, coffee shop, or audio walks. You don't need the fanciest apps. You need the tools that match your brain's rhythm. Your environment matters. You can't plant a seed in concrete and expect it to grow. The same goes for your mind. Know before you go. Building a learning strategy that works. So now you know the why, the reason to map your learning journey before diving in. But what does that actually look like? Let's break it down. Ultra learning begins with clarity, and clarity starts with 3 essential questions. 1. Why are you learning this? This is your fuel. Without it, you'll run out of steam before the first challenge. Ask yourself, is it to advance your career, to build a business, to change how you think, to simply become someone who can, who refuses to remain limited? Whatever your answer, be specific. Write it down. Repeat it daily. Burn it into your brain like a mantra. Because when things get hard, and they will, this why becomes your compass. 2. What exactly do you need to learn? Now it's time to scope the battlefield. You're not going to learn everything about a topic. That's a trap. Instead, identify the core skills, concepts, or subfields that drive results. Let's say you're learning graphic design. Do you really need to master art history, or do you need to learn layout, color theory, typography, Photoshop, client communication? Laser in on what actually matters. You don't need more knowledge. You need the right knowledge. And this is where meta-learning truly shines, helping you distinguish between signal and noise. 3. How should you learn it? Here's the secret. The way most people learn is inefficient by default. They follow the curriculum, take notes, watch videos, and hope it sticks. Not you. Ultra learners design custom strategies that suit their timeline, their personal goals, their lifestyle, and most importantly, their outcome. Maybe you don't need to read 10 books. Maybe what you need is to reverse engineer the best portfolios online, deconstruct winning YouTube tutorials, take on freelance gigs with tight deadlines and steep learning curves. That's active learning, not passive review. The 3 layers of meta-learning. Scott Young outlines 3 key dimensions you must map before beginning any learning project. 1. Concepts. The ideas. These are the building blocks, theories, terminology, and frameworks. Examples. In programming, loops, conditionals, object-oriented design. In public speaking, rhetoric, pacing, audience engagement. Understanding is king here, not just memorization. 2. Facts. The raw knowledge. These are the things you need to remember. Formulas, vocabulary, historical dates, etc. It's not glamorous, but it's necessary. Fortunately, spaced repetition, flashcards, and frequent recall techniques make this much easier. 3. Procedures. The practice. This is where skill is forged. Doing, applying, repeating. Whether it's solving problems, speaking the language, or producing content, procedures are the real muscle of your learning project. You don't just want to know something. You want to be able to do something with it. Case study. Learning a language. The ultra-learning way. Let's take Mandarin Chinese. Most people sign up for a course, memorize lists, watch shows, struggle for years. An ultra-learner? They define their why. I want to work in Shanghai in 12 months. Map the meta-learning. Concepts, tones, grammar structures, sentence patterns, facts, 2,000 most used characters, procedures, speaking practice, shadowing audio, daily conversations. Design the project, 90-minute focused sessions, full immersion, speaking with native speakers on italki every day. That's not accidental learning. That's strategic warfare. Tools for your meta-learning map. You don't need to guess. You can steal strategies from the best. Google. Search for how top performers in your field learned the skill. Reddit and forums. Real people share real learning paths. YouTube playlists. Dissect how successful creators built their skills. Reverse engineering. Study books, online courses, even curriculums. And extract only the high-impact parts. You're not bound by traditional routes. You're creating your own playbook. Action step. Before you go any further in this book, take 1 hour. Pick a skill you're dying to learn. Then write your why, your mission. The key concepts, facts, and procedures that matter. Your learning approach. Books, projects, challenges, deadlines, mentors. This is your meta-learning map. You're no longer wandering, you're advancing, with direction, purpose, and intensity. Why you must draw your map. First, let's get real. You wouldn't set out on a road trip across a foreign country without a map. You wouldn't climb a mountain without studying the terrain. So why do so many people jump into learning, an even more treacherous journey, without a plan? Because they've been lied to. They've been told that learning is passive, that you just absorb information if you show up, that you can coast through courses, watch YouTube videos, or sit in classrooms and somehow come out the other side transformed. But the truth is this: learning doesn't happen by accident. It happens by design. And the first stage of design is meta-learning. Learning how to learn what you need to learn, the 3 core questions of meta-learning. Scott Young breaks it down simply. Before you start any ultra-learning project, you need to answer 3 questions with ruthless clarity. Why are you learning this? What do you need to learn? How will you learn it? Let's break each one open. 1. Why are you learning this? The purpose behind your learning is the fuel that will keep you going when the road gets hard. And it will. You're not just learning Spanish to pass a test. You're learning it to connect with people, to travel boldly, to open new career doors. You're not just studying coding. You're building the skill set to create the life you want, one where you aren't stuck in a job you hate. Your why has to be big, personal, emotional. Because learning is not always easy. But when your reasons are real, they keep your fire lit when your mind wants to quit. 2. What do you need to learn? This is where most people fail. They try to learn everything and end up mastering nothing. Ultra-learners think like assassins. They identify the essential skills and knowledge, then eliminate everything else. You don't need to learn all of a language. You need the core vocabulary and patterns that help you communicate in your real-life situations. You don't need to master every programming language. You need the tools relevant to the app, product, or job you're focused on. This is where meta-learning shines, by helping you separate the signal from the noise. Your map must highlight the terrain that matters. Otherwise, you'll spend your energy wandering. 3. How will you learn it? This is where your plan gets tactical. What materials will you use? What methods will you apply? What sequence makes sense? If you're learning a language, will you use immersion, spaced repetition, conversation exchanges? If you're learning to code, will you build projects, watch tutorials, break down open source code. Your method must match your goal and your environment. The internet is full of learning tools, but ultra-learners don't use them all. They pick the best ones for the job. Meta is more than planning. It's strategic thinking. Don't mistake this for simple planning. Meta-learning isn't about making a to-do list. It's about thinking like a general preparing for war. Where are the high-value targets? What weapons do I need to win this battle? Where am I weakest? And how can I train those areas first? The ultra-learner isn't just doing more. They're thinking smarter. They're not running on willpower alone. They're driven by strategy. And this strategy starts with a map. Example: language learning. The ultra-learning way. Take Benny Lewis, who speaks over 10 languages. He doesn't learn by memorizing lists or passively consuming content. He asks, what specific situations do I need to navigate? Ordering food, getting directions. What patterns will help me build sentences fast? What tools can speed up feedback, like tutors, apps, or journaling? That's meta-learning in action. It's not about knowing everything. It's about knowing what matters most and drilling into it with laser focus. Without a map, you build on sand. Let's say you want to learn to code. Without meta-learning, you might waste months on theoretical concepts you'll never use, feel overwhelmed by the endless options, Python, Java, HTML, SQL. Give up when you don't feel progress. With meta-learning, you start with a clear project, build a basic personal finance tracker. Focus on the language that suits your goal, maybe Python with Flask. Create a plan to build, break, test, and refine, fast. Same desire, completely different outcome. The difference isn't talent, it's a map. Meta-learning gives you a competitive edge. In a world where people try to learn by osmosis, you will become the person who learns with intention. You will save months or years of wasted effort, make deeper progress in less time, stay motivated because you know exactly what you're working toward. This is how ultra-learners accelerate past their peers. They do what the average person never does. They study the game before playing it. The map can evolve, but you still need one. Now let's be honest. No plan survives first contact perfectly. Your goals may shift. Your strengths and weaknesses may surprise you. But none of that makes the map useless. In fact, the map becomes your compass. You update it as you move. You stay agile. But you never wander aimlessly. Ultra-learning isn't rigid, it's responsive. But responsiveness requires direction. And direction comes from your initial meta-strategy. Before you build anything meaningful, you need to understand the terrain. What's worth learning? What's worth ignoring? What will get you results fastest? That's the purpose of meta-learning. To give you a North Star, a blueprint, a fighting chance. Without it, you're just another person scrolling endlessly, hoping knowledge will somehow stick. With it, you're the architect of your own intelligence, the strategist of your own evolution. And that's the kind of learner the world needs now more than ever. Chapter 3. Focus. Focus isn't just about concentrating harder. It's about fighting for your attention like your life depends on it. Because in the age of endless notifications, dopamine loops, and information overload, your ability to focus has become your greatest competitive advantage and your most endangered skill. Most people think that learning is just about gathering knowledge. But real learning, the kind that changes your life, unlocks new careers, and helps you build deep expertise, requires long stretches of deep, uninterrupted focus. No hacks, no shortcuts, no half measures. But here's the brutal truth. You are under attack. Every app on your phone, every open browser tab, every just for a second glance at social media is a calculated strike against your focus. You're not lazy. You're overwhelmed by a system engineered to hijack your brain. Ultra-learners, those who accomplish seemingly superhuman feats of self-education, aren't born with magical brains. What they have is a battle-tested system for protecting and amplifying their focus. They don't wait for the perfect moment to concentrate. They engineer it. They build it. And you can too. The illusion of effort. How often do you sit down to work, only to find yourself checking your phone within minutes? How many times have you read the same sentence 5 times and still don't remember it? This isn't a failure of willpower. It's a failure of system design. Focus isn't just about trying harder. It's about understanding how your brain works, then shaping your environment to serve that biology. The brain is lazy by default. It wants novelty, ease, reward. But real learning happens in the uncomfortable zone, where things are hard, unfamiliar, and demanding. That's where focus comes in, not as a switch to flip, but as a skill to train. Like a muscle, your focus grows stronger the more you challenge it. But if you keep giving in to distractions, that muscle atrophies. You don't just lose time, you lose capacity. The 3 killers of focus. Scott Young identifies 3 main enemies of focus, and learning to defeat each is critical to mastering any skill. Procrastination. It's not that you don't want to learn. It's that your brain finds the immediate discomfort of effort harder to accept than the long-term reward. Procrastination is pain avoidance disguised as rational delay. Distraction. Even small interruptions break the deep focus cycle. One glance at a notification can cost 15 minutes of mental recovery. Distraction isn't passive, it's predatory. You must fight it like a disease. Fatigue. You can't focus if your body and brain are worn down. Poor sleep, overwork, and mental clutter don't just lower energy, they make distraction more tempting. Rest is part of the learning process, not a break from it. If you want to win the battle for focus, you must develop strategies to defeat all 3. The procrastination loop. Why do we delay the very things that can change our lives? Because your brain values comfort right now more than growth later. The brain is a survival machine. It avoids discomfort and seeks pleasure. That's why procrastination isn't laziness. It's a deeply ingrained survival instinct. Ultralearners don't magically resist this. They understand it, and then design systems to override it. They set specific time-bound goals. They use the 10-minute rule. Just start for 10 minutes. Momentum builds motivation. They break large tasks into atomic chunks so the brain doesn't panic. Procrastination is powerful, but it's predictable. If you can anticipate it, you can outsmart it. The trap of shallow work. Imagine this. You're working on a difficult programming challenge, writing a book, learning a new language. You hit a wall. Frustrated, you tab over to YouTube or Instagram for a quick break. That's not rest. That's escape. And worse, it's building a habit of shallow work. Shallow work feels productive. It fills time, but it doesn't move the needle. Real progress, the kind that builds mastery, comes from focused, intense, effortful work. Ultralearners don't avoid discomfort. They seek it out. Because they know that's where growth lives. Rituals of focus. To combat the chaos of modern life, ultralearners don't rely on motivation. They rely on ritual. Startup rituals. A cup of coffee, a deep breath, a specific chair. These small routines signal to the brain, it's time to focus. Time blocking. They schedule learning like a meeting. It's not optional. It's sacred. Digital firewalls. No notifications. No tabs. No phone in the room. The mind cannot focus when it is leaking attention. Focus is not a feeling. It's a habit. And habits are built on structure, not inspiration. The myth of multitasking. You've probably heard it before. I work better when I multitask. That's a lie your brain tells you. Multitasking feels efficient, but it's incredibly wasteful. Each time you switch tasks, you burn mental energy reorienting. That's why studies show multitasking can reduce your effective IQ by up to 15 points, the equivalent of being sleep-deprived. Ultralearners understand. Single tasking is a superpower. When you go deep on one thing, you activate a different level of mental clarity. one where breakthroughs and insight become possible. Battling the enemies of concentration. Focus isn't just about choosing where to put your attention, it's also about defending it. In a world that pulls us in 1,000 directions, the battle for focus is constant. Notifications scream, worries creep in, boredom tempts us to quit. And yet, true learners, the ones who make the extraordinary leap from average to exceptional, know that focus must be protected like a precious flame. There are 3 enemies of focus: procrastination, distraction, and lack of clarity. All 3 can cripple your ability to learn deeply. So, how do you win the war? 1. Procrastination, the silent killer of growth. We all know the feeling. You sit down to study, and suddenly, checking email seems urgent. The dishes need doing. You could just scroll for 5 minutes, and an hour slips away. This isn't laziness. It's a psychological defense mechanism. Your brain senses discomfort, the effort of learning, the fear of failure, and it escapes to safety, easy tasks, shallow pleasures. But here's the truth. You will never achieve mastery by avoiding discomfort. Ultra-learners know this. They recognize procrastination not as a flaw of character, but as a signal, your brain telling you, this will be hard, and they respond with courage, not retreat. One technique is the 5-minute rule. Commit to just 5 minutes of focused work. That's it. More often than not, once you begin, momentum kicks in. Action breeds motivation, not the other way around. You don't need to slay the entire dragon. Just take the first swing. Another strategy? Design your environment to make procrastination harder. Block websites. Remove your phone. Close your door. Make focus the path of least resistance. Learning doesn't have to be a struggle of willpower. It can be a smart design. 2. Distraction. The thief of progress. Focus dies in a noisy world. You might think you're multitasking, studying while checking your phone, flipping between tabs, listening to a podcast. But research is clear. Multitasking destroys performance. Your brain doesn't do 2 things at once. It switches, and every switch costs time and energy. Ultra-learners don't leave focus to chance. They create islands of attention, sacred spaces where nothing interrupts the flow. That might mean noise-canceling headphones, a quiet room, a time block on your calendar labeled deep work, do not disturb. These are not luxuries, they're necessities. But distraction isn't just external. It's internal too. Thoughts drift. Worries intrude. You start thinking about what you'll eat for lunch. The trick is not to fight those thoughts, but to gently return, over and over, like training a muscle. Every time you return to your focus, you're growing stronger. This is where meditation meets mastery. Even 5 minutes of daily mindfulness practice can strengthen your mental muscles, not because you become some Zen monk, but because you learn how to notice when your mind wanders and how to bring it back. 3. Lack of clarity, the hidden enemy. Sometimes we're not distracted, we're just confused. We sit down to study but don't know where to begin. The book is thick, the course is long, there's too much information and no roadmap. This fog of ambiguity kills focus. The solution? Turn chaos into clarity. Before you begin, define exactly what success looks like. Are you learning to speak Spanish fluently, or just enough for travel? Are you trying to understand the theory or apply it? The more specific your aim, the sharper your focus. Break your goal into chunks. Don't say, I'm going to study today. Say, I'm going to watch lesson 3, take notes, and practice for 20 minutes. Every small win builds momentum. Clarity fuels action. One of the best ways to create clarity is through project-based learning. Instead of endlessly reading theory, commit to building something. Want to learn to code? Make a website. Want to master painting? Create a series of portraits. Projects anchor your learning in the real world and make focus easier because you always know what you're working toward. Focus is a weapon, not a luxury. It is the lens through which effort becomes mastery and time becomes transformation. In the world of ultra-learning, where self-directed learners push the limits of their minds, focus isn't just helpful, it's the bedrock. But too often, we treat it like a scarce resource, not realizing that focus is less about talent and more about training. Just as a muscle grows stronger under tension, attention grows deeper with practice. Distraction is the disease of the modern age. Notifications, tabs, background noise, endless scrolling. It's a war zone out there. But the real enemy isn't just outside. It's inside. It's the habit of restlessness, the twitch to check, the fear of discomfort when facing something hard. That is what breaks learning. That is what we must unlearn. Scott Young didn't preach focus from a pedestal. He lived through the struggle. In his MIT challenge, he fought daily battles with distraction. The key wasn't perfection, it was resilience. He learned to design his environment for concentration, clearing digital clutter, scheduling deep work blocks, using full-screen modes, disabling alerts. Each tweak carved out a sanctuary where thinking could finally happen. But there's a deeper layer. True focus means learning how to sit with difficulty. When you hit a wall in learning, your mind screams for an escape. A browser, a snack, a dopamine hit. But ultra-learners train themselves to stay with the hard paragraph, to stay with the concept that doesn't click, to stay until something shifts. This is where the gold is buried, not on the surface, but beneath the struggle. Attention is a finite currency, and you must invest it wisely. Just as no one would pour money into a leaking bucket, no ultra-learner throws their focus into a distracted hour. You track it, you guard it, you schedule it with intention. That means knowing when you're most alert, morning, afternoon, evening, and structuring your hardest tasks for those prime slots. It means taking breaks before your brain fries, not after. And it means removing friction. One of Scott's biggest lessons was that procrastination often isn't laziness, it's confusion. If your next learning task isn't clearly defined, your brain stalls, so you clarify, break things down. Read Chapter 4 becomes, read pages 110, 130 and write a 3-sentence summary. Specific tasks remove hesitation and fuel momentum. Each small win builds motivation and pulls your focus deeper. Sometimes the problem isn't even the content, it's the fear. The fear of not understanding. The fear of not being good enough. These are emotional distractions masquerading as boredom. Ultra-learners confront these shadows. They don't run from the discomfort of confusion. They lean into it. Because confusion is the raw material of growth. Clarity is what you forge when you stay in the fire. There's also the myth of multitasking, the productivity lie. You can't kind of learn and kind of scroll through your phone. Attention is binary. You're either present or you're not. Research proves this over and over. Switching tasks imposes massive cognitive costs. So when you learn, you learn. One task, one goal, one moment at a time. But there's more to focus than shutting out noise. It's also about deepening awareness. Great learners don't just look, they observe. They don't just read, they interrogate the text. They don't just memorize, they wrestle with ideas. This kind of focus is active, not passive. It's not about staring longer, it's about engaging harder. To do this well, ultra-learners often develop rituals. Not just habits, but ceremonies of intention. A specific desk, a certain playlist, a pre-learning routine like stretching or deep breathing. These aren't gimmicks, they're signals to the brain. It's time to go deep. Over time, these cues condition the mind into flow states more easily, where hours pass in minutes and insights compound. Focus is not a gift, it is a practice. And like all practices, it sharpens with repetition. At first, you may last only 5 or 10 minutes of full attention. That's fine. That's the starting point. Don't chase perfection. Chase progress. Set timers. Use the Pomodoro method. Build endurance like an athlete. One focused sprint today, a deeper one tomorrow. That's how ultra learners ascend. And yes, there will be days when focus breaks, when your mind scatters like leaves in the wind. Don't beat yourself up. Instead, ask, what made my attention fragile today? Learn from it. Adjust. Improve. Because ultra learning is not about willpower, it's about systems. Systems that make focus easier, automatic, and sustainable. Remember, mastery isn't built in loud, chaotic spaces, it's born in silence. In the quiet hours when no one's watching. When you say no to the noise and yes to the mission. That's the moment when something shifts inside. You stop being a passive student of life and become an active architect of your mind. So stop waiting for the perfect time to concentrate. It won't come. Build the time. Build the system. Show up for it. Day by day, train your mind to hold, to aim, to pierce through complexity. That's how the average become extraordinary. That's how the scattered become focused. That's how you become unstoppable. What stands between you and the highest level of mastery is not intelligence. It's not talent. It's the rare and mighty skill of sustained, deep focus. Focus is not merely a switch you flip on. It is a battle you must fight every single day. And within that battle, one enemy proves most cunning: mental resistance. That subtle, slippery force that whispers distractions into your mind, makes your phone irresistible, makes you second-guess your priorities, tempts you with the shallow over the meaningful. This resistance doesn't disappear. It grows stronger the more valuable the task. But so too does your capacity to face it. Every time you sit down and choose to concentrate, truly concentrate, you reinforce a part of yourself most people never even meet. You meet the part of you that is forged in fire, the learner who doesn't flinch. To defeat mental resistance, you must design your environment to reduce friction. Create focus sanctuaries, spaces where your only purpose is to learn, build, or think. Eliminate temptations, not with willpower, but with preparation. Turn off notifications. Leave your phone outside the room. Block websites if you must. And when the boredom creeps in or the challenge feels overwhelming, stay. Push one breath further. Focus doesn't reward those who flee. It reveals its riches to those who endure. And yes, you will fail sometimes. You will check your messages. You will wander mentally. You'll fall short. But the key is not perfection. It is returning. Over and over, gently and relentlessly, bringing your mind back to the work. That act of coming back is itself a form of mental training. It's how the muscle of focus grows. One of the most overlooked truths in all of learning is this: deep work is a superpower in a shallow world. While the masses are drowning in distraction, you will have something different, an edge so sharp it cuts through the noise. When you can lock in for hours and learn faster than your peers, when you can solve complex problems because you've trained your mind to dive beneath the surface, you become someone unstoppable. You become a focused force in a scattered world. Focus is freedom, not restriction. It frees you from the tyranny of wasted hours, from the regret of unfollowed potential. It connects you to something deeper than dopamine, a kind of purpose, clarity, and progress that scrolling never delivers. You don't have to be perfect to develop focus. You only need to be deliberate. Practice returning to your learning. Practice protecting your attention. And most importantly, practice believing that your mind, when focused, is capable of greatness. This chapter ends not with a secret, but a truth. The power to learn anything rests not in what you know, but in your ability to focus long enough to find out. Master that, and the world is yours. Chapter 4. Directness. Go straight ahead. Learn by doing what actually matters. Too many people waste time preparing to prepare. They read dozens of articles before ever picking up the tool. They research endlessly, hoping to avoid failure. But in truth, they're avoiding learning. Why? Because real learning is uncomfortable. It demands direct confrontation with the unknown. But the truth is unshakable. If you want to get good at something, you must do the thing itself. This is what directness means. It's not about being reckless. It's about being honest with your goals. If you want to become a world-class software engineer, reading theory forever won't cut it. You have to build, debug, and face real-world complexity. If you want to speak French fluently, studying grammar endlessly without ever talking to someone is like trying to swim by reading about water. Real mastery begins when you move beyond the simulation and into the real world. Ultralearners don't hide behind passive study. They don't avoid difficulty with the excuse of, "I'm not ready yet." They get in the ring. They fight. They stumble. But that very struggle accelerates their progress in a way no amount of preparation ever could. Let's go deeper. The pitfall of indirect learning. Why do people resist directness? Because indirect learning feels safer. It gives the illusion of progress. Reading a book about negotiation is easier than actually sitting in a tense conversation. Watching videos on oil painting is more comfortable than putting brush to canvas and seeing yourself fail. Indirectness breeds procrastination. It keeps you busy but stagnant. You confuse activity with achievement. You build knowledge without application, muscles without motion. But information without context fades. Knowledge without practice dies. Ultralearning flips that upside down. You don't learn first, then do. You do in order to learn. Let's say you want to become a better public speaker. Instead of waiting until you've read 5 books and taken 2 courses, you force yourself to give a talk, even if it's terrible. Especially if it's terrible. Because that failure is feedback. That discomfort is the signal you're stretching your limits. It's the fuel of rapid growth. Learning indirectly may protect your ego, but learning directly will strengthen it. How to apply directness in real life. Scott Young gives example after example of successful ultralearners diving headfirst into their desired skill. No detours, no fluff. They chase direct relevance. Want to learn how to code? Start by building a small app. Want to learn how to write? Start publishing articles online, even if no one reads them. Want to start a business? Launch a basic version and see what happens. Do the real thing, even if imperfectly. And here's where most people get confused. Directness doesn't mean you never study theory. It just means that theory must serve action. Learn what you need, when you need it, not 10 steps in advance. Let the real world demand guide what you study. This keeps your learning relevant, engaging, and urgent. It pushes you to extract the most valuable knowledge, not because it's in the book, but because you actually need it now. Real world case. The language learner who skipped the textbook. Take Benny Lewis, one of the most famous ultralearners of language. When he decides to learn a new language, he doesn't start with flashcards. He doesn't memorize endless vocabulary. He forces himself to speak from day one. Is it awkward? Yes. Does he make mistakes? Constantly. But that's why he learns so fast. Benny's mission is always the same. I'm here to speak, not to pass a test. That's directness in action. It's raw, it's exposed, and it works. The courage to look stupid. Here's the uncomfortable truth most people avoid. To learn fast, you must be willing to look like a beginner. You must walk into situations where you don't know what you're doing. You must let go of pride, perfectionism, and the need to impress. Because learning is messy. And direct learning? It's brutally honest. You'll stammer, you'll get things wrong, you'll feel foolish. But within that struggle is the gold. The people who learn fastest are not the ones who hide their ignorance. They're the ones who confront it. Every ultralearner has faced this moment, the moment of embarrassment, of fear, of failure. What separates them is what they do next. They don't run. They lean in. Why school often gets this wrong. The traditional education system is designed around indirectness. You study theory for years before you ever apply it. You solve artificial problems rather than real ones. You memorize instead of experience. This creates graduates who are knowledgeable but unskilled, who've passed exams but can't perform in real life. Ultra-learning fixes this. It starts from the end goal, what do you actually want to be able to do, and works backward from there. You don't build bridges by studying physics forever. You learn physics to build better bridges. So if your goal is career transformation, life change, or mastery in any form, ask yourself the question, are you doing the thing you claim to want to master? If not, it's time to change that, today. Destroying the illusion of readiness. One of the most powerful mental barriers that stops people from achieving anything meaningful is the belief that they must be ready before they begin. We wait to feel smart enough, skilled enough, experienced enough, ready enough. But directness exposes that illusion for what it truly is, a lie dressed as caution, a trap dressed as preparation. The idea that we must know everything before we try anything keeps us endlessly circling the runway and never taking off. Scott Young doesn't mince words. He says the only way to truly prepare is to do the real thing. If you want to learn fast, then learning must look like doing, not reading, not thinking, not planning, but doing, right now, in the dirt, with the weight of resistance pressing down on you. When Scott tackled his MIT challenge, learning the equivalent of a computer science degree in a single year, he didn't tiptoe around the subject. He went straight for the actual exams, the real problem sets, the genuine MIT curriculum. Was he fully prepared? Not even close. But that's why it worked. Because the pressure of trying to do the real thing exposed exactly what he didn't understand and forced him to improve rapidly. Let's break this down. In most traditional learning systems, we're taught the theory first and application later. You sit through lectures, read textbooks, and complete practice drills in isolation, long before you're expected to do anything useful. This creates a dangerous gap. When you finally do need to apply your skills, the context feels alien. The confidence you built was artificial. Ultra-learning throws that model in reverse. It starts with action. The theory follows as needed. Imagine trying to learn a foreign language. Most people will study vocabulary, grammar, and verb conjugations for months before even attempting a conversation. But in the directness model, you flip that. You start talking. You stumble. You get stuck. Then, and only then, do you go look up the word you needed. You learn not based on what's in the curriculum, but based on what you tried to say but couldn't. That's real. That sticks. Here's the paradox. The people who grow the fastest are not the ones who wait until they're ready. They're the ones who act before they feel ready and figure things out in the process. The courage to begin before you're comfortable is a hallmark of every ultra-learner. Now, let's talk about a concept Scott Young calls drill failure. This happens when people get stuck on artificial practice that doesn't transfer to the real task. Think of someone who practices typing exercises all day but freezes when they try to write a real essay, or a pianist who plays scales perfectly, yet fumbles when performing an actual piece. These people aren't bad learners, they're just stuck in a simulated version of the skill. Directness shatters this by always connecting practice to the final performance. You don't drill aimlessly, you drill with purpose. You know what the real game looks like, and every practice session is a step toward it. This connection between effort and outcome builds both competence and confidence. Another key principle is feedback loops. When you practice in the real world, feedback is immediate. You know whether it worked or not. That clarity sharpens your understanding faster than passive study ever could. This is one reason ultra-learners often progress 10 times faster than traditional learners. They're getting real data every single time they try. And feedback doesn't just help you improve, it helps you focus. When you attempt a real task and hit a wall, you instantly know what to study next. That's just-in-time learning. No more guessing what might be important. The problem chooses your lesson for you. Here's the practical takeaway. If you want to build a skill that matters in your life, build it in the real world. If you want to be a designer, design things for clients or for yourself. If you want to be a musician, perform for people, even if it's two friends and a dog. If you want to be a writer, publish your work. Don't wait to be perfect. Be real. Because realness accelerates learning. Directness is about learning in the environment where the skill actually lives. You mimic not the theory, but the pressure, the timing, the emotion of real situations. And while that can feel overwhelming at first, it's exactly what makes you adapt fast. The brain doesn't optimize for safety, it optimizes for necessity. And necessity is born when you're in over your head. In ultra learning, over your head is a good place to be. It means you're learning. Too often, people treat learning like a sightseeing tour. They wander through textbooks, skim online articles, or watch endless videos without ever stepping into the arena where the real battles of learning take place. But ultra learners don't travel this way. They train like warriors. They simulate the real fight. They face discomfort head on. One of the most profound ideas in this chapter is the principle of transfer, the ability to apply what you've learned in one context to a different or practical one. Transfer isn't automatic. It doesn't come from knowing facts or mastering theory alone. It comes from practicing in conditions that mimic the actual challenge. That's why directness matters so much. You don't just want to learn French vocabulary. You want to be able to order dinner at a Parisian cafe, to understand a film without subtitles, to argue politics in fluent natural French. You don't just want to read about entrepreneurship. You want to pitch an idea, face rejection, raise capital, build a team, launch a product. Ultra learners ask, what am I ultimately trying to do with this knowledge? And then they simulate that scenario as early and as often as possible. Scott Young shares a powerful example from his own experience. When he wanted to learn public speaking, he didn't just study speech techniques. He signed up for live speaking engagements and filmed YouTube videos. He practiced the real thing. He went beyond theory into uncomfortable, high-stakes action. That's directness in motion. A lot of traditional education systems fail here. They give us information, but rarely require us to use it in practical or messy real-world ways. We memorize formulas, but never solve real problems. We write essays, but never communicate ideas under pressure. Ultralearning flips this model. It says, practice like you perform. If you want to thrive in real-life conditions, you need to practice under real-life conditions. This is especially critical when you're trying to retool or reskill. Let's say you're learning to code. Tutorials are a good start, but they're not the finish line. An ultralearner will build a real app, clone an existing tool, or contribute to an open-source project. These are direct, real-world challenges that actually grow skill and confidence. Passive consumption might make you feel like you're learning, but direct action proves it. Think of elite athletes. They don't just watch game film. They scrimmage. They play full-contact practice matches. They simulate real pressure. Why? Because when the whistle blows, theory means nothing if you haven't practiced like it mattered. In the same way, ultra-learners simulate stress, unpredictability, and reality. So when it's time to act, they are already battle-tested. There's also a psychological shift when you move from passive learning to direct performance. It forces you to confront weaknesses early. You don't have time to hide behind note cards or lectures. You're in the moment, and that sharpens your focus. It raises the stakes. It ignites your will to grow. This kind of intensity can be intimidating, but that's exactly why it works. You rise to meet challenges you otherwise would have avoided. You build resilience. You earn confidence not from someone's praise, but from your own victories, small or large, in real conditions. And let's be clear, directness doesn't mean perfection. It means iteration. You try, you fail, you refine, You repeat, over and over, each time getting closer to the standard you're chasing. It's gritty, it's real, it sticks. So if you're learning to paint, don't just study brush techniques. Paint actual canvases. If you're learning to negotiate, don't just read negotiation books. Make real deals. If you're learning to speak in public, step onto a stage. Every moment you spend in the arena will outpace hours spent in the classroom. Directness teaches you that learning is not about absorbing, it's about doing. And in the doing, you don't just gain skill, you gain belief. The belief that you can show up, take the shot, and learn from the outcome. That's how you grow. The courage to learn by doing. At the heart of directness lies something deeper than tactics. It's courage. The courage to step out of the comfort zone of passive learning and into the unpredictable arena of performance. The courage to say, I might fail, I might look foolish, but I will learn by doing. This mindset separates those who dabble from those who grow. Because truthfully, most people don't avoid directness because it's inefficient. They avoid it because it's uncomfortable. It forces them to confront reality, and reality doesn't flatter. But that's exactly why it works. It exposes the gaps between knowing and doing, between theory and mastery. Scott Young reminds us that even though this approach can feel raw and unpolished, it is the fastest path to real competence. He gives the example of people who learn to write by launching blogs instead of endlessly reading about writing, or those who learn design by taking on freelance projects, even when they don't feel ready. They're not reckless. They're deliberate. They design challenges that match their goals. They face them head on. And here's the paradox. While directness may feel harder in the short term, it actually saves time in the long run. Why? Because every direct experience delivers instant, honest feedback. You can immediately see what works and what doesn't. You're not guessing. You're learning exactly what you need, exactly when you need it. This efficiency is especially powerful in a world that changes quickly. If you rely on traditional learning methods, by the time you finish the course, the landscape may have shifted. But if you learn directly, through real-world doing, you're always one step ahead. You're not just storing knowledge, you're adapting, you're evolving, you're becoming anti-fragile. This is where experiential learning meets strategy. Ultra-learners don't blindly throw themselves into chaos. They prepare smartly, but they don't hide behind preparation. They know that over-preparing can be just another form of procrastination. Instead, they adopt a mindset of ready enough and they move forward. And here's the real gift of directness. It builds confidence that no book or lecture can. Confidence earned from sweat, from effort, from facing fear and moving anyway. This kind of confidence doesn't fade when a test ends. It stays with you because you didn't just learn something, you became something. You became the kind of person who takes action in the face of uncertainty. That shift is lifelong. So as you embark on your own ultra-learning journey, ask yourself, are you training for the test or for the real thing? Are you hiding behind preparation or stepping into the fire? Are you consuming or creating? Directness is not about perfection. It's about alignment between what you want to achieve and how you choose to learn. When you align your actions with your ultimate goal, learning accelerates. It becomes personal. It becomes real. It transforms you. And that's the essence of ultra-learning. Not learning for appearance, not for comfort, not for slow, safe results, but learning that is bold, purposeful, and fiercely effective. You don't need to be fearless. You just need to start. Learn like your life depends on it, because in many ways it does. Chapter 5. Retrieval. Why retrieval is the most powerful learning tool you're not using enough. Imagine standing on a stage, the spotlight fixed on you, and someone suddenly asks you to recall the most important lesson you've learned in your life. Your mind races. You sweat. You pause. That moment, where you're forced to recall without warning, is not just a test. It's a form of learning. Welcome to retrieval practice, the cornerstone of mastering anything deeply and permanently. Most people believe that learning is all about input. Read more, listen more, watch more tutorials. But what if that's only half the equation? What if the real gains don't come from the act of taking in information, but from the struggle of bringing it back? Scott Young emphasizes a powerful truth that research backs up. Pulling knowledge out of your memory is far more effective than constantly pushing it in. Retrieval isn't just a check for what you know, it's a mechanism that strengthens your brain's ability to hold on to and use that information. Let's unpack this with clarity. When you passively review a concept, say by rereading a page or watching a video again, you feel like you're learning. The material seems familiar, it feels smooth, but this is a dangerous illusion. Psychologists call this the fluency trap. Familiarity is not the same as mastery. Just because something looks familiar doesn't mean you can actually use it when it matters. True learning, the kind that shows up under pressure, comes from active struggle. When you close the book, turn off the video, and try to retrieve the ideas from your own mind, something different happens. You engage, you reach, you fail, you try again. That effort, that friction, is exactly what embeds the memory deeper into your mental wiring. It's the same principle behind strength training. You don't build muscle by watching someone else lift weights or by reading about proper form. You build strength by picking up the weight, feeling its resistance, and pushing your limits. Retrieval is mental resistance training. Now consider this. Many students and even professionals spend 90% of their time reviewing and only 10% recalling. That's like a basketball player spending all practice watching highlight reels instead of taking shots. The result? They feel prepared, but in the game, they choke. Why? Because they didn't train under pressure. Retrieval practice is how ultra-learners avoid this trap. Instead of spending endless hours in passive review, they flip the equation. They spend more time testing themselves than reabsorbing the same material. They quiz themselves constantly. They explain concepts out loud. They use flashcards. They write from memory. They simulate real conditions. And here's the kicker. You don't need to get the answer right to benefit. In fact, the effort to recall, even if it fails, is better for learning than simply reviewing the answer. This insight is a game changer. It means you can stop obsessing over getting things right and start focusing on trying hard to recall. Every failure, every blank stare, every mental fumble is actually building something stronger in your mind. Let's look at some research to drive this home. A landmark study by psychologists Roediger and Karpicki found that students who studied a passage and then took a practice test retained 50% more information a week later compared to those who studied the passage multiple times. And that's without additional study sessions. Just one retrieval exercise beat multiple rounds of review. This isn't an isolated finding. It's been replicated in domains ranging from science learning to language acquisition to surgical training. Retrieval is universally effective because it mirrors how we'll eventually need to use the information, under pressure, without notes, and often with consequences. In ultra-learning, this principle is non-negotiable. You don't just want to know something in a quiet room, you want to be able to use it in the chaos of life. Whether you're preparing for a job interview, a live performance, or solving a real-world problem, retrieval is how you simulate the heat of performance and train your brain to respond. Scott Young's own experiences reflect this. In his MIT challenge, where he learned the entire 4-year computer science curriculum in just 12 months, he didn't rely on passive review. He constantly practiced recalling solutions to problems, writing code from memory, and explaining complex ideas aloud. It was hard. It was frustrating. But it worked. Why? Because it mirrored the conditions under which real programmers work. No crutches, no notes, just raw, recalled skill. So, how can you apply this? You start by building a retrieval-first system. Before rereading your notes, ask yourself what you remember. Before watching another tutorial, try explaining what you've learned so far. When you get stuck, that's the moment to go back and review. Let retrieval drive review, not the other way around. Even simple strategies can make a massive impact. Use spaced repetition flashcards like Anki or Quizlet. Keep a learning journal where you summarize lessons from memory. Start every study session with a recap from recall. When you read a chapter, close the book and write down everything you remember. Then check. Teach the concept to someone else without looking at your notes. Each of these habits forces you to wrestle with your memory, to actively use what you've learned, and to reinforce the neural connections that matter most. But beyond the techniques, there's a deeper mindset, the willingness to lean into difficulty. Retrieval isn't always pleasant. It's cognitively taxing. It feels slower. But it's precisely that challenge that creates strength. Easy learning is deceptive. Struggle is a sign you're doing it right. In a world obsessed with shortcuts and hacks, retrieval reminds us that sometimes the harder path is the smarter one. If you want to remember it tomorrow, practice pulling it out today. If you want to use it under fire, drill it under pressure now. Retrieval is not an afterthought. It's the main event. If the first lesson of retrieval is understanding its power, then the second is how to apply it with strategy. Scott Young moves beyond theory and dives into tactical tools ultralearners use to make retrieval a daily practice, not a final exam. Because learning isn't a performance you prepare for once, it's a continuous rehearsal of your future self. 1. Recall without looking, even before you feel ready. One of the boldest suggestions in this chapter is counterintuitive. Test yourself before you've finished learning. Most people think you need to master the content before trying to recall it. But ultralearners reverse the order. The moment you're exposed to a new idea, pause, look away, and try to recall what you just heard or read. This retrieval-first approach primes your brain to pay attention. It sends a signal. This is important. I'll need to remember this. That signal alone sharpens focus and boosts retention. And if you fail, even better. You've just discovered a gap. That failure becomes your guidepost. For instance, if you read a chapter from a psychology book, don't just highlight and move on. Close the book. Try to list the key points. Reconstruct the argument. The act of reaching for knowledge is far more impactful than rereading it twice. 2. Free recall versus recognition. Scott draws a vital distinction here. Recognition is not retrieval. Just because something feels familiar doesn't mean you know it. Watching a video and nodding along doesn't equal mastery. To truly test your knowledge, try free recall, remembering without cues. Write down everything you know about a concept. Teach it aloud. Sketch a diagram from memory. These methods force you to generate knowledge, not just recognize it. A good metaphor here. Recognition is like seeing someone's face and remembering you've met. But free recall is naming that person, recalling their story, and holding a conversation. Recognition feels good, but doesn't prove anything. Retrieval builds actual skill. 3. Use flashcards, but the right way. Flashcards are a retrieval powerhouse, but only when used correctly. Many learners misuse them by flipping too fast or memorizing cards in order. Scott recommends spaced repetition systems, SRS, like Anki, which intelligently space out cards based on difficulty. But flashcards shouldn't just test trivial facts. You can design cards that ask, explain how X works, or list the steps to solve Y. These require deeper recall, and when you struggle, don't rush to flip the card. Wrestle with the answer. That struggle, that pause, it's where the learning happens. Also, don't be afraid to delete easy cards. Keep your deck sharp and challenging. Retrieval is a tool, not a trophy case. 4. Write from memory. The mental gym. One of the most powerful and simple techniques is writing from memory. After studying a topic, Close the book and write everything you can recall. This isn't just an assessment, it's a form of mental exercise. Imagine learning business strategies. Instead of copying notes, write a short essay from memory. What are the 5 forces of competition? How do they interact in real markets? This process turns ideas into your own language, deepening both understanding and recall. Scott points out that the best learners don't just repeat what they heard, they reconstruct it from within. 5. Teach to learn. The Feynman technique. One of the most beloved methods in this chapter is the Feynman technique, named after physicist Richard Feynman. It's simple but profound. Teach what you're learning as if you were explaining it to a child. No jargon, no shortcuts, just raw clarity. When you teach, you're forced to organize your thoughts, fill in gaps, and simplify complexity. That act of teaching becomes a test, and one of the most powerful retrieval tools you can use. It shows what you really know and what you're pretending to know. Scott even suggests recording yourself teaching or writing out explanations. When you do this regularly, you build a habit of turning learning into output. In this second part of the chapter, Scott equips you with a toolbox. But tools are useless without mindset. Retrieval isn't about proving yourself, it's about training yourself. Every time you retrieve, you engrave knowledge deeper. You're not reviewing, you're rebuilding knowledge from scratch, making it your own. And this matters more than ever. In a world full of information, those who can recall, apply, and explain ideas are the ones who rise. Retrieval is your weapon. Use it deliberately. Use it daily. Rewiring the mind through relentless recall. The world has taught you to consume, to passively soak in information, rewatch lectures, reread notes, highlight with fluorescent pens, and feel falsely productive. But consumption without confrontation is illusion. The battlefield of learning is not quiet contemplation. It is recall under pressure. And when you step into that arena and summon what you know, something transformational begins to happen. Memory isn't a vault, it's a set of pathways. Every time you retrieve a piece of knowledge, you strengthen the bridge between stimulus and response. You make recall easier next time, faster, more accurate. You sharpen the neural edge, carving deeper grooves into your mind. Repetition isn't reinforcement unless it demands something from you. This is why active retrieval is the forge of mastery. The person who quizzes themselves, who answers before checking, who dares to fail in private before succeeding in public, this person doesn't just know more, they understand more. They command their knowledge like a craftsman wields his tools. Yet, the world resists this method. Why? Because it's uncomfortable. Retrieval reveals what you don't know. It strips away illusions. It forces humility. And in that discomfort lies its power. Because learning begins not when you feel smart, but when you realize how much you still need to earn. Think of the great performers, the violinist who plays blindfolded, the chess master who reconstructs the game from memory, the doctor who diagnoses from symptoms alone before the test results come back. They practice retrieval, not review. They simulate the test before it comes, and because of that, when the real challenge arrives, they are ready. You may be tempted to reread. Don't. You may want to make it easy. Resist. True growth comes from struggle, not pain without purpose, but deliberate challenge. When you strain to remember, you rewire your brain. You build resilience. You cultivate speed of access, clarity of logic, and the unshakable confidence that comes from proving to yourself that you know. This isn't just about school. In every domain, from business to programming, from languages to leadership, the ability to retrieve is the foundation of effectiveness. You don't want to hesitate when it matters. You want instinct, sharpened by repetition, guided by structure, and built through sweat. So test yourself. Every single day. Create flashcards. Write down what you remember after reading. Teach it to someone else from memory. Speak aloud what you've just learned without checking your notes. Don't wait for exams. Create them. Become your own evaluator. Become your own challenger. When you make retrieval your ritual, memory becomes muscle. Your mind becomes agile. And learning becomes less about collecting facts and more about becoming formidable. Owning knowledge. Through struggle. Learning doesn't happen when you read something. It happens when you try to recall it and fail. And then, try again. That gap between what you thought you knew and what you can prove you know, that's where real progress is forged. Retrieval is not review. Retrieval is reality. You don't want to just recognize information. You want to reproduce it. You want it to live inside you, accessible under pressure, unshaken by stress. Imagine walking into a job interview, standing in front of a class, pitching a client, coding under deadline, or making a high-stakes decision. In those moments, you won't have time to refer to notes. You won't be able to look it up. You'll need what you've trained into yourself through retrieval. And here's the truth. You don't get good at retrieval just by doing it once. You need spaced retrieval, reaching into your memory at intervals, spaced just enough that it's hard, but not impossible. Each attempt should make you sweat just a little. That effort, that mental strain, that's your brain growing. Scott Young didn't just read textbooks. He built flashcard systems. He self-tested daily. He forced himself to answer before checking. And this wasn't just for facts. It was for formulas, code, ideas, frameworks, and foreign vocabulary, over and over. Because retrieval doesn't care what you're learning. It cares how you're learning. You don't need more hours. You need more intensity, more deliberate recall. If you reread something 5 times and feel good, you've wasted time. But if you recall it once, fully, painfully, and check your accuracy, you've made a powerful neural connection. Ultra learners flip the script. They don't wait until the final week to quiz themselves. They begin with testing. They build learning around retrieval, not the other way around. And they get better, faster, because they've removed the illusion of knowing. So how do you apply this? After learning something, stop. Close the book. Write down what you remember. Create a self-quiz. Ask, what would they ask on a test about this? Then answer. Use apps like Anki or physical flashcards to build a growing system of challenges. Teach others, without notes. This is the ultimate test. You don't need to know everything all at once, but you need to train retrieval like you train muscle. Regular, consistent, just past your comfort zone. This is the discipline of self-learning. It's not glamorous. It's not always fun. But it's how you gain true command. It's how knowledge becomes part of your operating system. Not something you have to reach for, but something that reaches out when you need it. There's a reason retrieval is hard. It's because your brain is working. Embrace that difficulty. Seek it. Because when you can reach into your mind and pull out exactly what you need, you become unstoppable. Chapter 6. Feedback. Turn pain into progress. Feedback is the mirror you can't ignore. It shows you where you fall short, where your weaknesses hide, where your assumptions break. And yet, most people avoid it. Why? Because it hurts. Because it exposes. Because it forces humility. But for the ultra learner, feedback isn't just accepted. It's pursued. It's the scalpel that carves growth. It's the hard truth that sharpens your edge. In the journey of ultra learning, feedback is one of the most critical accelerators. Without it, you could be running full speed in the wrong direction. With it, even painful, uncomfortable feedback, you course correct early. You improve faster. You stop wasting time on what feels right and start focusing on what is right. Scott Young learned this firsthand during the MIT challenge. He wasn't just learning information, he was testing his understanding against reality. Did his code compile? Did his solution match the answer key? Did he pass the test? Each piece of feedback was immediate, raw, and unforgiving. But it was real. That's the kind of feedback you want. But here's the deeper lesson. Not all feedback is created equal. There are three kinds of feedback you need to understand. Outcome. Feedback. This tells you how you did. You get a grade, a score, a result. It's the broadest and most impersonal. It tells you what happened, but not why. Informational feedback. This shows you where you made mistakes. It gives you specifics, points to the gaps, highlights the wrong turns. It's more helpful because it gives direction. Corrective feedback. This is the gold standard. It tells you not just what went wrong, but how to fix it. It's often hard to find, but invaluable when you do. It turns failure into instruction. The problem? Most people only get the first type. They take a test, see a grade, feel happy or disappointed, and move on. They never dive into the details. They never ask why they were wrong, and so they repeat the same mistakes over and over. Ultra learners are different. They seek out the second and third kinds of feedback. They dig for it. They don't just ask, "Was this good?" They ask, "How can I make it better?" They're not looking for praise. They're looking for precision, for insight, for truth. This mindset shift is essential. You have to stop treating feedback like a judgment and start treating it like a tool. Feedback isn't personal. It's a data point, a direction, a diagnostic. Think of a pianist practicing scales. If they play a wrong note and no one points it out, the error becomes habit. But if a teacher corrects them, that's a G sharp, not a G. The mistake is interrupted, corrected, and the learning deepens. That's how it works with language learners, programmers, artists, marketers, athletes. Every high-level performer knows, without feedback, you're flying blind. And yet, feedback is often avoided, especially by smart, capable people. Why? Because it bruises the ego. It reveals flaws. It forces confrontation with inadequacy. But growth requires that confrontation. If you want to improve, you must make peace with being wrong. In fact, being wrong is one of the fastest ways to learn. If you listen to what the wrongness is telling you. This is why ultra learners use feedback loops constantly. They don't just wait for big moments like tests or performances. They bake feedback into their daily routine. They test, adjust, retest. They build feedback into every task. Think of a language learner using pronunciation software to correct tone, or a designer sharing early mock-ups for critique, or a writer using an AI editor to highlight awkward phrasing. These aren't final exams, they're live diagnostics. Instant feedback that creates instant improvement. But you have to be ready for it. If you're too fragile, too defensive, too attached to being right, you'll miss the message. You'll reject the mirror. You'll silence the signal. And that's why the emotional component of feedback is just as important as the intellectual. You must train yourself to hear critique without shrinking. You must welcome discomfort as a sign of real growth. The best ultra learners even invite harsh feedback. They ask mentors to be brutally honest. They ask peers to rip apart their work. They don't want compliments. They want clarity, because clarity leads to progress. If you're working in isolation, it's even more important to engineer your own feedback systems. Don't rely on others to offer it. Create it. Use apps, benchmarks, scorecards, performance tests. Track your results. Keep a journal. Record yourself. Analyze your work. Feedback doesn't have to come from people. It can come from systems. And when you do get feedback from others, listen with curiosity, not defensiveness. Ask follow-up questions. Seek patterns. Don't dismiss what's uncomfortable. Lean into it. You don't grow from applause. You grow from resistance, from challenge, from friction. So ask yourself right now, where am I avoiding feedback? What system can I put in place to give me regular, honest insight into my progress? Who can I ask to give me real, unfiltered input? Because the truth is this. You're not stuck because you're not smart. You're stuck because you're not seeing what's broken. Feedback is how you begin to see. And once you see, you can fix. And once you fix, you can fly. There is something uniquely uncomfortable about feedback. It strips you bare. It points to your blind spots. It reveals where you're not as great as you thought you were. And yet, within that discomfort lies your sharpest edge of growth. This is the paradox of feedback. It hurts, but it heals. The moment you embrace feedback not as a threat, but as a tool, you start to see it for what it truly is: a mirror. And not just any mirror, but one that reflects both your strength and your weaknesses with brutal honesty. Feedback is the reality check that cuts through your ego and says, here's what's working, here's what's not. Now, what will you do about it? Scott Young breaks down feedback into 3 essential types. Outcome. Feedback. This is the simplest kind. You attempt something and the world responds. You get a grade, a result, a win, or a loss. It's blunt, but it tells you where you stand. Informational feedback. This digs deeper. It gives you details about what specifically went right or wrong. It doesn't just say, you failed. It tells you why. Corrective feedback. This is the gold. It doesn't just highlight mistakes. It points you toward improvement. It tells you not just what's broken, but how to fix it. If you want to become exceptional at anything, you can't just dip your toe in feedback. You must dive headfirst into it. Let's bring it down to a story. Imagine you're learning to speak a new language. You talk to a native speaker and they correct your grammar. That sting of correction? That's feedback. You mispronounce a word and they laugh, not cruelly, but because it sounded funny. Again, feedback. You realize your vocabulary is limited when you can't explain a simple idea. That's outcome feedback. Now, you can either shrink away in shame or lean in and let these moments guide your growth. Great ultra-learners don't dodge these punches. They step into them. They invite them. This is one of the things that separates high achievers from the rest. Most people avoid feedback because they're afraid of being exposed, but high performers crave it because they understand that every piece of feedback, whether it's a jab, a slap, or a pat on the back, is data. And data is how you adjust, how you sharpen, how you win. Take Benjamin Franklin as a historical example. In his youth, Franklin wrote essays and published them anonymously, but he didn't just write in solitude. He formed a club, the Junto, where members critiqued each other's ideas, writing, and reasoning. Through that constant feedback, Franklin became not just a better writer, but a better thinker and communicator. That's the power of structured feedback. Scott Young emphasizes this. Feedback is not something to be passively received. It's something to be actively sought. Waiting for feedback to come to you is a weak strategy. You must ask for it, hunt for it, chase it down. If you're building a skill and you're not getting regular feedback, you're essentially walking in the dark. You might move forward, but you're more likely to stumble. Feedback shines a light on the path, and the brighter the light, the faster and more confidently you can move. But here's a critical distinction. Not all feedback is helpful. Some feedback is vague, some is misguided, some is downright toxic. You must develop the discernment to know what to take in and what to ignore. This is where emotional resilience comes into play. To get the full benefit of feedback, you need to manage the sting. You must resist the natural human instinct to get defensive. You must train yourself to listen, even when your ego is screaming. And most importantly, you must learn how to extract the truth from even poorly delivered criticism. Think of feedback as a raw material. Sometimes it arrives clean and polished. Other times it's muddy and harsh. But if you're willing to do the work, you can dig the gold out of any form it takes. Your job isn't to wait for perfect feedback. Your job is to mine the useful from the noise, to seek clarity amid the sting, to build your tolerance to discomfort until feedback becomes not just acceptable, but welcome. This is the mindset of the ultra-learner. To sum up this part, feedback isn't the enemy. It's your greatest ally, if you can learn how to handle it. It's not something you get after you've mastered a skill. It's what helps you master the skill. So stop dodging the punches. Take the hit. Learn from it. Emerge sharper. Learning is not just about doing something repeatedly. It's about doing it better every time. And for that, you need feedback. Real, raw, sometimes uncomfortable feedback. Because without it, you're not practicing. You're simply reinforcing mediocrity. In ultra-learning, feedback is not the enemy. It's your fiercest ally. But it doesn't always come neatly packaged or politely delivered. Sometimes it stings. Sometimes it feels like failure. And that's exactly why it matters. Let's step into the shoes of someone pushing boundaries. Someone like Ray Dalio, the legendary investor who built one of the most successful hedge funds in the world, Bridgewater Associates. Dalio built a culture around radical transparency. Every decision, every mistake, every critique was open for discussion, not to hurt egos, but to build strength. That feedback culture was uncomfortable, even painful at times, but it created relentless clarity. He once said, "Pain plus reflection equal progress." And that's the formula ultra-learners must adopt. Now let's bring it back to you. Feedback isn't just a pat on the back or a vague, "good job." It's data. It's insight. It's the signal that tells you where the cracks are before everything crumbles. But many people run from it. Why? Because it bruises the ego. Because it makes them feel exposed. Because it hurts. But here's the truth. Every time you avoid feedback, you trade short-term comfort for long-term stagnation. You deny yourself the truth you need to evolve. Think of feedback as your mirror. It doesn't lie. It doesn't flatter. It shows you what's there, raw and real. And when you learn to face it without flinching, you begin to grow in ways that passive learners never will. Take the example of an aspiring public speaker. They can practice their speech in front of a mirror 100 times. They can rehearse alone until every line is perfect. But until they stand in front of a real audience, until they hear the coughs, see the yawns, feel the silence when a joke lands flat, they don't really know how they're doing. Feedback doesn't just inform you, it transforms you. And in ultra-learning, you don't wait passively for feedback to arrive. You chase it. You seek it out with urgency. You ask, where did I mess up? What didn't make sense? What confused you? What bored you? Not because you crave approval, but because you crave clarity. You want to know where you fell short so you can come back stronger, sharper, and unshakable. But you have to be smart about feedback. Not all of it is created equal. Ultra-learners know the difference between outcome feedback, informational feedback, and corrective feedback. Outcome feedback is like a scoreboard. It tells you whether you succeeded or failed, but not why. Informational feedback gives you insight into what you did right or wrong. It begins to reveal how you're doing. Corrective feedback is the gold mine. It tells you exactly what to change to improve. Seek all three, but lean into corrective feedback. That's the feedback that refines your edge. Here's a truth most people never grasp. Feedback is often misinterpreted as a judgment on your worth. But in reality, it's a blueprint for your next level. It's not saying you're not good enough. It's saying, here's what you need to become better. When you strip the ego away, you begin to see feedback not as punishment, but as a path. Remember, the goal of ultra-learning is not perfection. The goal is progress. And progress only happens when you confront your blind spots, wrestle with your weaknesses, and recalibrate with ruthless honesty. So the next time someone gives you feedback, even if it's harsh, even if it bruises your pride, pause, breathe, and ask yourself, what can I learn from this? Because every piece of feedback you absorb and apply is a step closer to mastery. And mastery isn't given, it's earned. In blood, in sweat, and yes, in the sting of feedback. So, how do you actually integrate feedback into your ultra-learning journey? Not just as a passive observer, but as an active transformer of your own ability. It starts with a mindset shift. You must become addicted to improvement more than approval. Most people seek feedback only when they expect praise. But ultra learners, they seek it especially when they don't. Because they know that the moments that make you win aren't the ones where everything goes right. They're the moments where you face the hard truth and refuse to turn away. Let's talk tactics, because wanting feedback isn't enough. You have to engineer it into your process. 1. Build feedback loops into your practice. Instead of waiting until the end of a project to see how you did, set checkpoints throughout. Break things down. Get micro feedback on smaller components. Are you learning a language? Get corrected sentence by sentence, not just after a 30-minute conversation. Are you learning to code? Run small tests after each module instead of building the entire system first. These loops shrink the delay between action and feedback, making learning faster and sharper. 2. Choose high-quality feedback sources. Not all opinions are worth listening to. Feedback from someone who doesn't understand your craft can confuse more than it clarifies. So seek mentors. Find people who've done what you're trying to do. Learn from their patterns. Listen when they speak. Feedback is only as good as its source, and you want it pure, not polluted. 3. Practice emotional distance. Your ego will want to flinch. Your pride will want to fight back. But don't let it. Feedback is about your performance, not your personhood. Separate who you are from what you did. This creates room to listen without defensiveness and to act without paralysis. 4. Reflect ruthlessly. Feedback without reflection is noise. After you receive input, don't just nod and move on. Sit with it. Dissect it. Ask, what's the truth in this? What patterns are emerging? What would happen if I changed this? This step turns feedback into fuel. 5. Apply fast. Don't let insights sit on a shelf. Act. Implement the changes. Rewrite the script. Rework the presentation. Redo the design. Every hour you delay weakens the power of that feedback. Ultra learners don't just hear, they adapt. Here's the paradox. The more feedback you take, the less you fear it. You become feedback hungry. Because once you realize that every critique is a step closer to mastery, you start chasing them. You stop needing to be the best in the room and start working to become the best, through constant refinement. And that's the difference between the passive learner and the ultra learner. The passive learner is crushed by criticism. The ultra learner is carved by it, sharpened by it, defined by it. Think of it like forging a blade. Heat, pressure, pounding. That's how you strengthen steel. Not by shielding it, but by putting it through the fire. Feedback is the fire of your learning. It might burn a little, but it will also make you unbreakable. So stop dodging the punches. Lean into them. Because every jab, every sting, every uncomfortable truth you're willing to face is a brick in the foundation of your greatness. Feedback isn't something to fear, it's something to welcome. Because in the end, it's not what the world tells you that shapes your future. It's what you're willing to listen to, learn from, and change because of. That's how ultra learners grow. That's how legends are made. Chapter 7. Retention. Don't fill a leaky bucket. You've put in the hours. You've struggled through the difficult material. You've sacrificed your time, energy, and comfort zones. But then, a few days or weeks later, it's gone. The knowledge you worked so hard to acquire has vanished like mist under sunlight. This is the leaky bucket problem, the all-too-common experience of learning without retaining. And in ultra-learning, retention isn't a luxury. It's a necessity. Because learning that doesn't stick is effort wasted. Retention isn't about cramming or repetition alone. It's about building durable mental connections, crafting memory systems that last, and anchoring your knowledge so deeply that it becomes part of who you are. And the first rule of real retention is this: don't just try to remember, train to remember. When you review, do it actively. Passive rereading is the equivalent of pouring water into a sieve. It might feel productive, but the knowledge slips through. Active recall, testing yourself, wrestling with memory, and forcing your brain to retrieve information without cues, is one of the most powerful retention strategies available. It strengthens neural pathways and turns short-term understanding into long-term mastery. Think of your brain like a forest. When you recall something, it's like walking a path. The more you walk it, the clearer and more accessible it becomes. But if you never walk the trail, it becomes overgrown and lost. Retrieval practice carves trails through your cognitive forest. The more often you test yourself, the easier it becomes to find your way back to the knowledge you need. Scott Young references research showing that students who test themselves after studying retain far more than those who simply reread. And not just slightly more, sometimes double the retention. That's because retrieval is an act of learning, not just remembering. It teaches your brain what's important and reinforces it through struggle. It's in the struggle that growth happens. Retention also demands spacing. When you revisit material after some forgetting has occurred, you actually retain it better than if you review immediately. This is called the spacing effect, and it works because it forces the brain to work harder, which builds stronger connections. If you want to remember something forever, don't review it 10 times in one day. Review it once today, again in a week, then a month later, and so on. This turns knowledge from temporary awareness into permanent intuition. Let's not forget the emotional side of memory. Things that are emotionally charged, meaningful, or surprising tend to stick better. So don't treat your learning like a sterile task. Inject emotion, curiosity, even playfulness. Make the material matter to you. Create associations. Link what you're learning to real life. Use stories, analogies, metaphors, whatever it takes to breathe life into your knowledge. One of the biggest retention mistakes? Treating knowledge like a list of facts. The brain isn't a filing cabinet, it's a web. When you connect what you're learning to other concepts, ideas, or experiences, you're weaving a net that can catch and hold much more. So build connections. Ask how ideas relate to one another. Map out the relationships. Turn information into a network of meaning. And finally, beware of illusions of competence. Just because you recognize something doesn't mean you know it. Just because you can follow along with a video or a book doesn't mean you could explain it or apply it. The true test of retention isn't recognition, it's recall and application. So challenge yourself. Explain concepts in your own words. Teach someone else. Apply your knowledge to solve real problems. Retention is the foundation of mastery. Without it, all your learning leaks away, leaving you with the illusion of progress. With it, your efforts compound, your understanding deepens, and your confidence grows. Don't let your bucket leak. Seal it with purpose, discipline, and strategy. Because learning that lasts isn't just remembered, it's lived. Learning isn't just about gathering facts, it's about holding on to them when they matter most. You could read 10 books, take 5 courses, and watch 100 videos. But if you can't remember what you learned when the time comes to use it, it's like carrying water in a bucket full of holes. That's the brutal reality of weak retention. So, how do you fix it? You train like someone preparing for a real test, because life is a test. You practice retrieving information, not just reviewing it. Let's make this clear. Memorization is not the enemy. It only becomes a problem when it's passive and mindless. Active recall, pulling information from your memory without cues, is where real retention happens. It's not about reading something over and over. It's about struggling to remember it without looking. That friction, that effort, is what makes it stick. Think about how you learned multiplication as a child. It wasn't from staring at the times tables. It was from testing yourself, drilling flashcards, and reciting answers until they were automatic. The same principle applies to any deep skill, no matter how complex. You must retrieve it, over and over, in the environment where you expect to use it. Scott Young draws on research to show how the forgetting curve works. You forget most of what you learn unless you interrupt that decay. The solution? Spaced repetition. Instead of cramming all at once and forgetting everything the next week, you space your review sessions so that just as your brain is about to forget, you remind it. This timing is critical. It's like feeding your memory right when it's hungry. Each time you recall something at the edge of forgetting, your memory strengthens exponentially. But this kind of effortful recall can feel discouraging. It's tempting to stick with rereading because it feels like progress. But don't be fooled. Just because something feels easy doesn't mean it's effective. In fact, ease is the enemy of mastery. Real learning is supposed to feel hard. It's supposed to stretch you. Retrieval forces you to do the work your brain needs to retain. Now let's get practical. If you're learning a language, don't just review vocabulary. Test yourself daily. Cover up the definitions. Say the word aloud. Type it from memory. If you're studying for a professional exam, don't just highlight your notes. Build quizzes. Explain concepts out loud. Simulate real test conditions. If you're mastering coding, don't just watch tutorials. Close them and try writing code from scratch. Fall, fail, and repeat. That's how you cement knowledge. And here's a truth you can't ignore. Retention isn't a one-time act. It's a habit. You must schedule it, track it, and commit to it like exercise. Build systems that test your knowledge. Create routines that force you to recall. Use flashcards. Write summaries. Teach what you've learned. The moment you start building a system to retain what you learn, everything you study gains power. Retention doesn't happen by chance. It happens by design. You don't just absorb knowledge and expect it to stay. You build memory like you build muscle, through tension, resistance, and deliberate effort. And one of the greatest tools you can use to achieve this is deliberate forgetting. Wait, forgetting? Yes. Strategic forgetting is just as important as remembering. The brain is not a warehouse of infinite space. It's an organic filter. It sheds what you don't use. So what do? You fight forgetting by proving again and again that what you learned matters. You do this by recalling, applying, and practicing it, in context. Context is everything. If you want to remember something when it matters, you must practice in the environment where it matters. Don't just memorize vocabulary on your couch. Test yourself in real conversations. Don't just read code samples. Solve real bugs. Don't just learn music theory. Perform under pressure. That's what makes knowledge stick. Scott Young uses the idea of directness here again. The closer your practice mimics real-world application, the stronger the retention. Your brain prioritizes survival, relevance, and utility. If you treat your knowledge like it's disposable, your brain will dispose of it. But if you prove it's essential, if you call on it during action, pressure, or challenge, your mind locks it in. Now let's talk about mental models. These aren't just facts. They're frameworks for thinking. And they're more memorable than raw data. When you attach new knowledge to an existing model, it becomes harder to forget. Think of them like scaffolding for ideas. If you want to retain information long-term, build mental hooks, analogies, and patterns around what you're learning. Let's say you're learning economics. Instead of memorizing isolated terms, understand the cause and effect system, how incentives shape behavior, how scarcity drives value. That structure lets you remember not just the facts, but why they matter. You begin to see connections between ideas, and the brain loves connections. And here's the secret sauce. Teaching. If you really want to retain something, teach it to someone else. The act of organizing your thoughts, explaining them clearly, and answering questions forces you to internalize the material. Teaching is retrieval at its highest level. You find out fast what you truly know, and what you don't. Still, most people avoid this kind of challenge. It feels vulnerable. It's easier to stay passive, to review and reread and pretend that knowledge is safe. But it's not. It's leaking, every day, unless you patch the holes. You must be relentless in your practice, in your review, in your recall. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being persistent. You don't need to remember everything, but you must remember the right things, the critical skills, the core principles, the deep insights. And you don't get there by hoping. You get there by showing up over and over again and doing the hard work of retrieval. Not just once, but forever. The goal of ultra-learning is not just to learn fast. It's to remember what matters. That's why retention is the backbone of everything. Without it, your learning is shallow. You can't build on what you forget. You can't master what you can't recall. You don't climb to the top of your potential by stepping on ideas that vanish. So what's the real strategy? It's a mindset shift. You stop thinking of learning as a single event. You start thinking of it as a cycle. Learn, apply, retrieve, review. Then do it again. And again. Each time the memory grows stronger. Each time the knowledge becomes more yours. Let's return to a core technique. Spaced repetition. This is not some fancy productivity hack. It's science-backed, powerful, and underused. You revisit material at increasing intervals. Today, tomorrow, next week, next month. You stop reviewing when it's still fresh and start testing when it's starting to fade. That's the key. Because struggling to recall is where the magic happens. That struggle is what makes the memory stick. But this isn't about using apps or systems or tools. Those help. But they're not the point. The point is building a rhythm, a habit, a culture of review, a deep commitment to never letting what you've worked for slip away. You become the kind of person who checks in on your learning, who challenges yourself to explain things, who circles back, not out of fear, but out of respect for your own growth. And when you do forget, you don't panic. You don't shame yourself. You rebuild. You take it as a signal that it's time to re-engage. Because forgetting isn't failure. Forgetting is feedback. It shows you what needs work. It points the way forward. In ultra-learning, nothing is left to chance. You track what you forget, and then you fight for it. You develop a warrior's mindset around retention. You don't surrender knowledge to time or neglect. You defend it. You fortify it with deliberate effort. And that makes you dangerous, in the best way possible. Let's bring it all home. Retention is how you close the loop. It's how you transform hours of input into lasting capability. It's how you make sure that all the challenges, all the sweat, all the grind stick. And in a world drowning in forgettable information, the learner who remembers becomes the one who leads. Don't just learn, retain. Don't just collect knowledge. Own it. Because mastery doesn't belong to the one who reads the most books or watches the most videos. Mastery belongs to the one who keeps what they learn, sharpens it daily, and never lets it dull. You are not here to leak knowledge. You are here to lock it in. This is how you win. Chapter 8. Intuition. Dig deep before building up. In the world of fast knowledge and surface-level learning, intuition stands as a superpower. It's that uncanny sense of knowing, not because you memorized, but because you understand. It's when the pieces click together in your mind before you can explain them. It's when you look at a problem and your gut already whispers the answer. But let's get one thing clear. Intuition isn't magic. It isn't talent. It's not some mysterious gift handed down by fate. It's earned. Brick by brick. Thought by thought. Pattern by pattern. Intuition is what happens when depth meets experience. So why is it critical in ultra-learning? Because when you're learning hard, complex, or abstract material, you're not just dealing with facts. You're wrestling with concepts, the invisible frameworks behind the facts. And unless you build those frameworks yourself, the facts fall flat. They become trivia. They won't hold under pressure. That's why intuition matters. It's what lets you see beneath the surface of what you're learning. It's what gives you the power to solve novel problems, make quick decisions, and innovate on the spot. It's the invisible edge, the thing that separates the good from the great. But how do you develop intuition? You start by going deep, not wide. Don't skim. Don't rush. Pick fewer things and push harder. When you face a hard concept, don't move past it. Stop. Wrestle. Break it down. Build it back up. Ask questions. Answer them. And then ask better ones. Ultra learners don't just consume knowledge, they interrogate it. They question it. They test it. They take nothing for granted. They think about the why behind the what, the structure beneath the surface. And when they still don't get it, they dig deeper. Because every time you push past confusion, every time you fight through fog, every time you force yourself to really understand, you build something powerful inside your mind. Not just information, but insight. Not just recall, but recognition. That's how you train intuition. You challenge yourself to explain what you've learned out loud in your own words. You solve problems from scratch. You rebuild ideas without a guide. You don't just follow instructions. You create your own logic map. Because that's what true learning is. It's not mimicking. It's modeling. It's building your own version of reality inside your head and trusting that model enough to make decisions with it. In the next section, we'll explore how to overcome the illusion of understanding, how to use analogies to unlock deep comprehension, and why intuition is the ultimate sign that you've gone beyond surface-level learning. But for now, remember this: you don't build intuition by watching from the shore. You earn it by diving deep. Most people make the same mistake when learning something new. They confuse familiarity with understanding. They read a paragraph, recognize the words, and assume they've mastered the concept. But when challenged to explain it in their own words or solve a problem using that concept, they freeze. Why? Because the knowledge never sank deep. It skimmed the surface. It never became intuition. This is where ultra learners separate themselves from the crowd. They don't settle for the illusion of learning. They test their comprehension ruthlessly. They use one of the most powerful tools of all, the Feynman technique, named after Nobel-winning physicist Richard Feynman. The idea is simple. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. So you pick a concept you're trying to master and you explain it, out loud, on paper, to a wall, to a friend, to yourself, like you're teaching it to a child. No jargon, no shortcuts, just clarity. If you stumble, circle back. If you get stuck, you've found your weak point, and that's where the real work begins. This process forces your brain to restructure knowledge. You don't just memorize facts, you build mental connections. You clarify cause and effect. You see how pieces interlock. You start thinking in systems instead of fragments. And slowly, something remarkable happens. What once felt like a fog begins to clear. What once confused you now flows naturally. You begin to anticipate the next step. You no longer just follow the logic, you own it. This is the seed of intuition. But building intuition isn't just about explaining things. It's also about asking the right kinds of questions. Questions like, what is really happening underneath this idea? Why does this method work? What are its limits? What would happen if I changed one part? What does this remind me of in another field? These questions unlock analogies, the brain's shortcut to deep comprehension. When you can relate a new concept to something you already understand, you form a bridge, and once that bridge exists, intuition crosses over with ease. Take math, for instance. A student might struggle with complex calculus until they understand the underlying idea, that it's just measuring the rate of change or finding the area under a curve. Once they get that intuition, formulas become tools, not burdens. They can visualize the math instead of blindly solving it. In science, this is how breakthroughs happen. Not by memorizing data, but by seeing patterns others missed, by developing a sense, almost a feel, for how things work. That's the kind of mastery ultra learners chase, and it only comes from depth. So if you're tempted to move on quickly because something feels hard, stop. That discomfort is not a sign of failure. It's a signal of growth. Dig deeper. Fight to understand. Push until you can teach it, explain it, apply it. That's how knowledge transforms from information into instinct. Because intuition isn't a shortcut, it's a reward, and it belongs to those who earn it. There's a temptation in our modern world to seek speed over depth. Apps promise we can learn a language in 15 minutes a day. Courses advertise shortcuts to success. But when you look at the people who are truly great at what they do, a different truth emerges. They didn't skim the surface. They went deep. Ultra-learners cultivate intuition by embracing complexity rather than running from it. They understand that real mastery is often born in the moments when things stop making sense, because those are the very edges of their understanding. Instead of backing off, they double down. Let's say you're learning programming. At first, it's syntax, rules, basic loops and conditions. It feels mechanical. But then one day, you come across recursion or functional patterns. It doesn't just confuse you, it baffles you. Most learners would skip ahead, memorize just enough to pass a test and move on. But not the ultra-learner. They pause. They experiment. They write dozens of small programs to test the behavior. They explain what they're seeing. They search for analogies. They break it and build it again. Because they know that on the other side of that frustration is ownership. Once they understand it, not just remember it, they never forget it. This is the critical shift. You move from external dependence, needing tutorials, needing teachers, to internal confidence. You start trusting your ability to figure things out from first principles. That's intuition. And intuition brings speed. Not the shallow kind, but the real kind that comes after depth. Once you've internalized the logic, new problems become easier. You don't need to stop and look up every concept. You don't freeze when the question is slightly different. You start to anticipate, adapt, and improvise, like a jazz musician who's practiced scales until their fingers just know where to go. But none of this is accidental. Ultra-learners engineer their learning for this outcome. They make complexity their teacher. They slow down to accelerate. They dig in when others check out. And they treat their confusion not as a curse, but as a clue. Confusion isn't the end of learning. It's the beginning of understanding. It means your brain has reached the boundary of what it knows. And that boundary is where growth begins. Think of it like this. Knowledge is a building, and intuition is its foundation. You can't build something strong on sand. You need to excavate first, to clear out the fluff, lay the concrete, reinforce it with steel. That takes time. That takes struggle. But when storms come, and they always do, only the buildings with strong foundations remain. This is why ultra-learners don't race to the top. They dig deep first, because they know that without intuition, all learning is fragile. It's a house of cards, waiting to collapse under pressure. And so they keep asking, do I really understand this? Could I explain it to a stranger? Could I solve a new problem using this idea without hints or help? These are not easy questions, but they're the questions that separate surface learners from deep thinkers. To cultivate intuition, you must first be willing to confront your own ignorance. That's not easy. Most people run from what they don't understand. They pretend, guess, or skip forward hoping the problem will go away. But ultra-learners? They face it head-on. They don't just acknowledge their gaps, they attack them. This means stepping away from the illusion of progress. Just because you're moving forward doesn't mean you're getting stronger. Real progress happens when you pause long enough to truly understand what you're building on. You don't climb higher by stacking shaky blocks. You climb higher by reinforcing the base. The ultra-learner asks, where does this idea come from? What's the core principle underneath this technique? Can I derive this from scratch if I had to? These are not casual questions. They are acts of mental rebellion. Because to answer them, you must think, not just repeat. You must break through passive absorption and demand clarity from your own mind. Take physics, for example. Memorizing formulas can get you through a test, but deriving them yourself from fundamental laws? That changes how you see the world. It rewires how you think. That's intuition. It's not remembering Newton's laws. It's feeling them in your bones when a car brakes or a ball arcs through the air. Intuition is also what turns fear into fluency. In fields like mathematics, science, or advanced languages, learners often hit a wall, the point where it no longer feels logical or obvious. Most give up. Ultra learners don't. They welcome the wall because they know. The wall marks the beginning of mastery. And how do they break through? Through struggle, productive struggle. Not blindly guessing, but wrestling with the problem, trying different angles, failing and reflecting, until suddenly the fog lifts and the answer appears, not because someone gave it to them, but because they earned it. This is the birth of intuition. But it's not a one-time event. Like muscle, intuition strengthens through repetition, load, and recovery. The more you challenge your assumptions, the more you explain what you know, the deeper your roots go. It becomes automatic, not because it was easy, but because it was understood at the deepest level. In truth, ultra-learning is not just about learning more. It's about knowing better, not memorizing faster, but thinking clearer, not doing more work, but doing deeper work. And that's what intuition brings: the ability to act with confidence, solve with creativity, and adapt with elegance, even in the face of uncertainty. So when the world around you says, "Take the shortcut," the ultra-learner says, "No, I'll take the stairs." Because they know that real power doesn't come from quick wins. It comes from knowing deeply why you win and how to do it again. Dig deep. Build strong. Let intuition carry you where memory alone cannot. Chapter 9. Experimentation. Find your way to the finish line. There comes a point in every learning journey where mastery isn't just about doing what you're told. It's about discovering what works. And that's where experimentation enters. If learning were a straight path, everyone would reach the summit. But the truth, the path is full of detours, false starts, and dead ends. Only the bold keep moving forward, not because they know the exact way, but because they're willing to try. Experimentation is the ultra-learner's secret weapon. It's the force that turns theory into action, hesitation into progress, and confusion into clarity. When the rules no longer fit, when the textbooks fall short, when mentors are silent, experimentation is what keeps you going. Scott Young puts it plainly: the best learners don't wait to be told. They explore, they test, they tweak. They trust that insight comes not just from thinking harder, but from doing differently. And that starts with a mindset. Curiosity over comfort. The world conditions us to play it safe. Follow instructions, stick to the formula. But ultra-learners break the mold. They know that formulas may help you start, but only experiments help you grow. They ask, what if I tried it this way? What happens if I change this variable? Can I make this even better? This isn't reckless trial and error. This is strategic, intentional exploration. It's the pursuit of better, not just more. Think of a chef in a test kitchen, not blindly mixing ingredients, but purposefully adjusting flavors to craft something exceptional. That's what experimentation looks like in learning. It's not about avoiding mistakes. It's about inviting insights through them. Because when you experiment, you learn faster. You get feedback that theory alone can't give you. You discover hidden talents, creative shortcuts, and smarter strategies. Most importantly, you build confidence, not the kind that comes from approval, but the kind that's earned through action. Ultra-learners don't fear failure in their experiments. They study it. They dissect what didn't work, extract the lesson, and try again. That resilience? It's not accidental. It's built in. Every failed attempt is fuel. Every small discovery is momentum. The question isn't, will this work? It's, what will I learn if it doesn't? That shift changes everything. Because when you embrace experimentation, the pressure to be perfect disappears. You stop needing the right answer right away. Instead, you create the conditions for the right answer to emerge, through movement, through insight, through persistence. So whatever your craft, coding, public speaking, painting, business, music, the path to mastery won't be handed to you. You have to build it, brick by experimental brick. And that's what ultra-learners do. Before you blaze your own trail, you often have to walk the paths of others. It might sound counterintuitive. If you're trying to innovate, why would you start by copying? But here's the truth. Mastery begins with imitation, not originality. The greatest artists copied the masters before creating their own masterpieces. The best musicians play covers before composing symphonies. And ultra-learners? They're no different. Copying isn't weakness. It's wisdom. It's how we learn the patterns, the structure, the form, so we can one day break free from them with purpose. Scott Young makes a crucial point. Don't aim to reinvent the wheel too early. First, understand how the wheel works. When you copy intelligently, you do more than just follow steps. You start to decode the thinking behind them. You see the structure, the flow, the decisions. You begin to notice, why did they do it this way? What effect does that change have? Could I adapt this to suit me better? That's not mindless repetition. That's active imitation, and it's one of the fastest ways to internalize excellence. But here's where the magic happens. You don't stop there. Copying is the starting line, not the destination. Once you've internalized the structure, you begin to experiment. You tweak, you replace, you challenge, you evolve. At this stage, you're no longer just copying, you're transforming. Say you're learning to draw. At first, you copy from a great illustrator, line by line, shadow by shadow. But over time, your hand starts to move with more instinct. You add your own flair. You adjust proportions. You explore new styles. What began as replication becomes creation. This is the transition every ultra-learner makes, from apprentice to innovator. And it doesn't stop there. Experimentation isn't only about your output, it's also about your process. How you study, how you practice, how you test yourself. Everything is open to improvement. Ultra-learners are relentless about optimizing their methods. They ask, can I remember more if I test myself differently? Would switching my schedule increase focus? What if I completely flipped how I approach this problem? This mindset turns every moment into an opportunity to grow. Even frustration becomes feedback. Confusion becomes curiosity. And failure? It becomes fuel. You see, experimentation makes learning alive again. It turns you from a passive receiver into an active creator. It empowers you to take control, to shape your journey instead of waiting to be guided. That's what separates ultra-learners from the rest. Not just their intensity, but their willingness to explore, to question, to test, to keep pushing, even when no one's watching. So if you're stuck in your learning, if the method you're using feels stale or slow, maybe it's time to experiment. Try a new approach, change your tools, tweak your schedule, break the pattern. You don't need permission. You just need curiosity and the courage to follow where it leads. Here's a hard truth. Playing it safe is the biggest risk of all. Many learners fall into the trap of thinking that following a structured curriculum, step by step, will guarantee results. It's comfortable. It's predictable. But ultra-learners know that real mastery lives outside your comfort zone. It thrives in the unknown. It's forged in the fire of trial, error, and relentless iteration. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. That's why experimentation isn't just a technique. It's a philosophy. One rooted in embracing uncertainty and using it as a tool for growth. Let's say you're learning a new programming language. Sure, you can finish every course, follow every tutorial, complete every project exactly as instructed. And you'll learn something. But compare that to this. You ditch the guide, attempt to build your own app, fail miserably, fix one bug, fail again, and then, finally, make it work. That learning? That's deep, emotional, and unforgettable. Failure becomes your greatest teacher, not your enemy. This is what ultralearners understand better than most: the value of deliberate failure. Not reckless or lazy mistakes, but intentional pushes into territory where you might stumble. Because in those stumbles, your brain rewires. It notices gaps. It adapts. It strengthens. Scott Young offers a powerful insight here. If you're not occasionally failing, you're not pushing hard enough. You're not testing your limits. You're staying inside the safe zone, where growth is minimal and learning is slow. But if you lean into the edge, where you risk making a mistake, forgetting a fact, or looking foolish, that's where real transformation begins. The key is to fail smart. Reflect on what went wrong. Adjust your strategy. Try again. Ultralearners treat every experiment, successful or not, as data. They're always running tests on themselves. What if I studied in shorter, more intense bursts? Would a physical whiteboard help me see the problem differently? Can I simulate real conditions and test myself under pressure? This mindset mirrors how elite athletes train. They don't just practice, they measure, adjust, tweak. They try new drills, equipment, schedules. They're obsessed with optimization, and so should you be. In fact, Scott points out that ultralearners often invent their own learning strategies. They're not afraid to defy tradition or discard ineffective techniques. If something doesn't work for them, even if it's popular, they move on, fast. That's because they're not loyal to methods. They're loyal to results. This is experimentation at its core. It's a commitment to curiosity over convention, to progress over perfection. It requires humility, the willingness to be wrong, to look silly, to make a mess. But it also builds confidence. Because over time, you become someone who doesn't fear the unknown. You run toward it. You stop being a passive student and become an active learner-engineer, always building, testing, tweaking, improving. So the next time you feel stuck, or like you're just going through the motions, remember, your learning is your laboratory. Your mind is the experiment, and you hold the power to create breakthroughs, one bold test at a time. Ultra-learning thrives on the principle that the best way to learn isn't to wait for clarity, it's to chase it down through experimentation. Think of Thomas Edison. He didn't invent the light bulb on the first try. He experimented over 1,000 times before finding the right filament. Every failed attempt wasn't a mistake. It was a step closer to brilliance. He once said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." That's the spirit you need to embrace as an ultra-learner. Now here's where the magic happens. Experimentation doesn't just reveal what works, it reveals what works for you. There is no single perfect learning method. What works for a language learner may fail a mathematician. What energizes one mind may exhaust another. Through experimentation, you create a personalized learning algorithm, a custom system tailored to your strengths, challenges, schedule, and goals. You're not just learning a subject, you're learning how you learn. For instance, maybe flashcards aren't helping you retain vocabulary. Try storytelling, still not sticking. Record your voice and play it back. Still flat. Act out scenes in your room. Keep testing. Keep tweaking. Keep building your toolbox. Every ultralearner eventually assembles their own learning lab, a space where tools, environments, rituals, and feedback systems combine into something powerful, something deeply personal, something that evolves with them. Scott Young introduces the idea of learning heuristics, rules of thumb developed through trial and error. These aren't downloaded from textbooks, they're earned, crafted through hundreds of small experiments. Like, I remember better when I teach someone else. I retain more when I write by hand. Morning hours give me peak focus. Each heuristic becomes a building block in your strategy, and over time, your approach becomes so sharp, so fluid, so dialed in, that learning anything feels like unlocking a superpower. And that's the goal of experimentation, to unlock effortless acceleration. But here's a deeper truth. Experimentation also builds resilience. When you train yourself to expect failure, it stops scaring you. When you see every setback as feedback, it stops breaking your momentum. You stop quitting when things get hard and start digging deeper. You trust the process because you've seen the process work. This mindset turns every learner into a warrior. You become bold, strategic, adaptive, no longer shaken by obstacles, but energized by them. So here's the challenge. Become a scientist of your own mind. Don't just follow what's worked for others. Test what could work better for you. Don't wait for perfect conditions. Engineer them. Don't fear failure. Leverage it. Because every great innovator, artist, coder, writer, thinker, every ultra-learner got to mastery through messy, creative, persistent, courageous experimentation. This is where the real game begins. So build your experiments. Break your routines. Change the variables. And every time something doesn't work, say, "Good, I just learned what not to do." You're not failing. You're iterating. You're not confused. You're curious. You're not stuck. You're innovating. This is your path. Make it your own. Experiment. Learn. Evolve. Repeat. That's how you reach the finish line and beyond. Chapter 10. Mastery. Dig deep before you build high. Mastery is not a sprint. It's a slow burn, a quiet climb. It's not about doing more. It's about doing deeper. In ultra learning, Scott Young defines mastery not as perfection, but as reaching a point where your skills are robust, flexible, and ready for the real world. It's not just about knowing facts or procedures. It's about deeply understanding the underlying principles that drive what you're learning. Here's the hard truth. Most people stop at surface-level knowledge. They memorize, mimic, pass the test, and move on. But ultra-learners, they go deeper. They ask, "Why does this work?" And "What would happen if I changed it?" They push beyond competence toward true understanding. Mastery starts by going back to the foundation. Think of learning like constructing a building. The higher you want to build, the deeper you need to dig. If your understanding is shallow, your tower will topple. But when the foundation is solid, you can build endlessly. Take the example of Richard Feynman, the legendary physicist. He didn't just memorize formulas. He made sure he could explain complex concepts in simple, intuitive terms. He used analogies, visuals, and playful curiosity to grasp things deeply. This technique, now called the Feynman technique, is one of the most powerful tools for mastering anything. Here's how it works. Pick a concept you want to master. Try to explain it simply, as if teaching a child. Identify gaps in your understanding. Go back to the source and learn again. Repeat until your explanation is crystal clear. This method forces your brain to wrestle with ideas, not just remember them. And in that struggle, true learning happens. But mastery also requires another ingredient: patience. In a world of shortcuts, hacks, and instant gratification, deep work has become rare. But mastery demands it. It demands time spent wrestling with a single idea until it clicks. It demands that you revisit the basics long after everyone else has moved on. It's not glamorous, it's not fast, but it's powerful. Mastery also asks you to stretch your limits. Once you've got the basics, don't settle. Go harder. Push your understanding into new, uncomfortable territories. Tackle harder problems. Learn adjacent topics. Try applying your skills in unfamiliar contexts. Ultra learners don't wait for mastery to arrive. They forge it. That means asking better questions, practicing deliberately, creating custom challenges. It means staying humble enough to say, "I don't know this well enough yet." and persistent enough to keep going anyway. You don't need to master everything, but for the things that truly matter, your career, your passion, your craft, you owe yourself the depth, the clarity, the power that only mastery can bring. Because when you reach that level, everything changes. Suddenly, problems that once seemed hard become manageable. Tasks that drained you now flow with ease. You become not just skilled, but confident, capable, creative, free. Mastery isn't just about knowing, it's about owning. Owning your craft, owning your growth, owning your potential. And it all begins by going deeper, not wider. So slow down. Revisit the basics. Explain things simply. Dig deep. Build high. This is the mindset of a true ultra-learner. This is the first step toward mastery. Mastery is not about amassing information. It's about transformation. It's about reshaping the way you think, process, and create. It's the point at which skills move from conscious effort to near automatic excellence. But to reach this level, you must not just study the map, you must walk the terrain. Scott Young emphasizes that depth matters more than breadth. Most learners make the mistake of grazing topics superficially, collecting scattered facts and techniques without internalizing them. Ultra-learners, in contrast, relentlessly dig into the few things that matter most. They don't try to know everything. They aim to truly understand what counts. This means identifying core principles, the fundamental ideas that make everything else work. In any subject, these are the building blocks that support everything else. In programming, it could be logic and data structures. In drawing, it's perspective and form. In music, it's rhythm and harmony. When you focus on mastering these core principles, everything else becomes easier, like learning to read music before composing a song or understanding grammar before writing poetry. You're not just piling on techniques, you're internalizing structure. But how do you know when you've reached true depth? Scott suggests this litmus test. Can you apply what you've learned in a real, unfamiliar situation? If not, you haven't mastered it yet. True mastery reveals itself when you're able to adapt your knowledge flexibly. When you're not confined to scripts, but can improvise, create, solve problems on the fly. This is the mark of someone who hasn't just studied. They've transformed. That's why active recall and self-explanation are so important. They force your brain to rebuild knowledge from scratch rather than just recognizing it. Passive review may make you feel familiar with material, but it's deceptive. Mastery comes from production, not recognition. And then comes the plateau. Every learner hits it. After an initial burst of progress, improvement slows. Things that once seemed exciting now feel repetitive. You're tempted to quit or move on to something new. But this is precisely when mastery is forged. The plateau isn't failure, it's consolidation. It's your brain working behind the scenes, organizing, connecting, reinforcing. If you keep showing up, you break through. If you quit too soon, you rob yourself of the reward. Here's a key insight from ultra-learning. Mastery is often invisible. It builds silently beneath the surface, until one day it bursts through in a moment of clarity, performance, or insight. The struggle, the repetition, the confusion, they're all necessary. They're part of the process of turning a clumsy beginner into a powerful expert. So don't resent the slow progress. Respect it, embrace it, own it. Because every hour you spend refining your skill, every mistake you make and correct, every insight you fight for, adds weight to your foundation. It builds the invisible strength that others will one day admire, but never fully understand. They'll see your talent, but not your toil. They'll praise your performance, but not your persistence. They'll applaud your brilliance, but not your battle through the plateau. That's the paradox of mastery. It looks effortless, but it's anything but. It's the reward of those who stay when others leave, who dig when others skim, who endure when others quit. This is what it means to dig deep. This is what it means to become great. Reaching mastery is like constructing a cathedral, slow, intentional, and precise. Every detail matters. Every stone laid must be placed with care because the whole structure depends on it. In ultra learning, Scott Young emphasizes this same philosophy when building expertise. You must build deep before you build high. At the heart of this principle lies a concept Scott repeatedly returns to: drilling down. Drilling is the art of isolating weaknesses and sharpening them until they're no longer liabilities. It's not glamorous, it's not fast, but it's the path to brilliance. Imagine you're learning to speak a new language. Instead of simply practicing long conversations, an ultra learner will pause and drill the exact grammar structure they fumble with, or focus intensely on pronunciation of a single sound. Why? Because a single weak link can collapse the entire chain of performance. This is where most learners go wrong. They seek comfort in practice that feels productive but doesn't challenge their limits. It's tempting to review familiar material or repeat what you already know, but mastery demands the opposite, working right at the edge of your ability. This edge is called the zone of proximal development, where tasks are not too easy, not impossibly hard, but just difficult enough to stretch your skills. Operating here feels uncomfortable. You make more mistakes. You feel clumsy. But that's where the magic happens. That's where real growth occurs. Scott illustrates this with the story of Benjamin Franklin, who taught himself to write with elegance by methodically reconstructing the style of essays he admired. He didn't just read them, he rewrote them, summarized them, then tried to recreate them from memory. Each time, he identified gaps in his understanding and worked to close them. This kind of focused, uncomfortable effort built not just skill, but mastery. Ultra learners embrace this discomfort. They treat frustration as a compass. Instead of backing away when a concept feels too hard, they lean in. They ask, what exactly don't I understand here? Where is the gap? What's the smallest piece of this I can improve today? In doing so, they transform setbacks into stepping stones. This mindset is especially important when dealing with abstract or complex fields: math, science, design, code. You must break things down until they're digestible. You must get to the root, because in mastery, clarity always wins over complexity. Here's another powerful idea from Scott. Don't confuse activity with progress. You might spend hours watching tutorials or highlighting textbooks, but unless you're actively engaging, testing, recalling, applying, you're not building deep mastery. You're just decorating the surface. Mastery requires you to interrogate what you think you know, to wrestle with real problems, and to fail forward. It's not about appearing smart, it's about becoming unshakably competent. And this level of depth demands time. There's no shortcut, no cheat code, no quick fix. But the reward? When true mastery arrives, it's powerful, freeing, and enduring. You're no longer guessing. You're no longer copying. You're creating, innovating, leading. You've internalized the rules so deeply that you can now break them with purpose. It's the difference between a pianist who plays sheet music well and a pianist who improvises soulfully. It's the difference between a coder who copies templates and one who writes clean, efficient, original systems. It's the difference between a mimic and a master. So if you're serious about becoming world-class at anything, commit to depth. Do the hard drills. Lean into the resistance. Stay in the discomfort. Refine one skill at a time. Because in the end, it's not the flashy start or the fast progress that sets masters apart. It's their unshakable foundation. They built deep, so they could rise high. As you push toward mastery, it becomes clear. This journey isn't just about skills or knowledge. It's about identity. The ultra learner doesn't just do mastery. They become the master. Scott Young highlights a vital truth. Mastery transforms how you see yourself. When you've wrestled deeply with a subject, fought through confusion, and emerged with clarity, your confidence doesn't just grow, it becomes rooted in reality. You stop being a learner who wishes to master. You become someone who has mastered. This identity shift is powerful. It rewires motivation. It changes your relationship with failure. Instead of fearing mistakes, you view them as essential feedback from a trusted teacher, yourself. Mastery also demands lifelong commitment. The ultralearner knows that no matter how deep their knowledge, there's always more to explore, more to refine. Mastery isn't a finish line, it's a moving target. This mindset requires humility and hunger. It means celebrating milestones without resting on laurels. It means welcoming challenges, knowing they are opportunities for growth. Scott shares examples of legendary masters, Leonardo da Vinci, Marie Curie, and others, who never stopped learning. Their genius came from relentless curiosity, constant experimentation, and a refusal to settle. And this relentless pursuit is available to you. By digging deep before building high, you create not only expertise, but resilience. You develop a mind that thrives in complexity, embraces challenge, and adapts with grace. That's the ultimate prize of ultralearning. A skill set that's deep, flexible, and powerful. A confidence that's earned, not given. An identity as a master learner. Someone who doesn't just chase knowledge, but commands it. So as you close this chapter, remember, don't rush the foundation. Embrace drilling and discomfort. Seek understanding, not just facts. Build your skills brick by brick with patience and persistence. And most importantly, believe in your capacity to become great. Because mastery isn't reserved for the gifted. It's earned by the determined. It's earned by you. Conclusion. The ultralearning mindset. Your path to lifelong mastery. Ultralearning is more than just a method. It is a philosophy of life. A bold commitment that you can take control of how you learn, grow, and transform yourself to achieve greatness beyond limits. Scott Young closes the book with a powerful call to action. Don't wait for someone else to teach you. Don't wait for the perfect circumstances. Don't let fear of failure or self-doubt hold you back. You are the captain of your own learning journey. The ultralearning mindset is a fusion of burning curiosity, relentless perseverance, and the courage to challenge yourself through every experiment, every failure, every success. When you apply the principles of ultralearning, from choosing clear goals, planning meticulously, focusing deeply, to diving into knowledge and constantly experimenting, you are building a power that surpasses anyone who learns by traditional means. This is the path to not just learning a skill, but learning how to learn anything. To not just pursue knowledge, but to turn knowledge into strength and freedom. And when you step onto this path, you no longer follow, you lead. You become a game changer, a creator of your own future. Scott ends with a challenge. You can learn anything. Don't wait for miracles. Create them. Make ultralearning your way of life. Make learning extraordinary. The road ahead may be hard, but the rewards are priceless. Are you ready to begin your ultralearning journey? Start today. You've now seen what's possible. You've walked through the principles, felt the urgency, and glimpsed the power of taking control of your own mind. Ultralearning isn't a theory. It's a weapon, a mindset, a decision. But the real journey doesn't begin on these pages. It begins the moment you close this book and choose to act. So here's your challenge. Pick one thing, just one. One skill you've put off. One dream that scares you. One challenge that matters. Then, commit. Design your project. Eliminate distractions. Face the discomfort. And learn like your future depends on it, because it does. You don't need to be the smartest. You don't need permission. You just need to begin. So don't wait. Don't wish. Don't wonder. Start now. Be bold. Become your own teacher. And show the world what happens when you learn without limits. If you found value in this video, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share it with a friend who needs this wisdom.